He's coming out.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
It's time to stop the chaos and rebuild our country together.
We Conservatives have got a clear plan to secure our future.
Good evening and welcome to Grimsby and welcome to Sky's Election Leaders event. Right now you can see Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, the man who's hoping to get another term in office and to win the election, is leaving the car and entering Grimsby Town Hall, where of course he is going to face that grilling from our political editor Beth Rigby and then the live audience of viewers. And there he is, there is Rishi Sunak. A few protesters outside the town hall here in Grimsby. He's entering the room, ready to face the Sky News Election Leaders event. Quick handshake with the Sky News chairman, David Rhodes, and the Prime Minister is now in the building. Two men, two policy platforms, two pictures to the public, but in 22 days' time, only one will be entering number 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister. This is the battle for number 10. Well, hello and welcome to the spin room here in Grimsby Town Hall. There's now less than a half an hour to go until Keir Starmer will come onto the stage in the room that's just around the corner from where we are right now. He'll then be followed by Rishi Sunak, who of course we saw entering the building just a few moments ago. They will both face a 20-minute interview with our political editor, Beth Rigby, and then a 25-minute Q&A with an audience. So if you haven't made up your mind about who to vote for, well, this is your perfect chance to see them up close. The two men will be head-to-head in the most meaningful sense. They'll be answering questions, they'll be explaining themselves, and they'll be articulating their vision. So if you want a direct comparison, this is it. And there's one more thing that I want to say before we get cracking. It's easy to think that this is an election campaign without much jeopardy. A campaign where we already know the outcome, but there is an awful lot of jeopardy tonight. For Rishi Sunak, it's one of his last chances to turn things around and to save his election campaign. And for Keir Starmer, well, frankly, it's his to lose. If Labour's strategy has been to carefully carry that Ming vase across the floor, well, tonight he's got to get through 45 minutes without breaking it. Will he manage it? And of course, the big question, who will come out on top? Both leaders have spent the day here in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, and just to warn you, there are some flashing images to come as well. Sir Keir Starmer arrived here a short time ago after touring the set. The Labour leader said he's looking forward to tonight, and he talked about the work that he's done preparing. Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, joins us now. Sam, a huge moment for both men. What are they going to be hoping for?
The question, Sophie, is will this define the election campaign? Here we are at the halfway point, more or less, to July the 4th. And there's been a lot of frenetic activity over the first few weeks. But this is a moment with extended interviews and with questions from a key audience, an audience that really speaks for so much of the most important bits of the electorate that are going to the polls on, that will be visiting the polls on July the 4th. The question is whether or not we get something new and something different. This campaign has been marked by promises that we've tried to scratch the surface of, but can we go deeper now? Let's be absolutely clear about the picture, the polling picture, as it were, that we're going into with this debate. And if we just look at those polls as they go back, over months and months and months, Labour has been ahead. It's been decisively ahead by about 20 percentage points, and it has maintained that lead. That is the reason why you're completely right to say it is Keir Starmer's to lose at the moment. But he's such a new prospect as Prime Minister when it comes to the British public. Do we know enough? Can we find out some more? How will he deal with spending and tax and borrowing beyond the sound bites that we've had? That's the kind of challenge for him. How can Rishi Sunak keep his party together given all the turmoil in the months to come if he's re-elected? We'll find out more, probably, almost certainly, after 7:30.
Yeah, it's going to be so exciting, isn't it, Sam? And I know that you're going to have some snap polling to bring us to that I'm really looking forward to. Sam Coates there with the build-up to what could be a decisive moment in the election campaign. We're in the spin room now, just to give you a bit of context. And really, the atmosphere has been building and building and building over the last few hours. It's filling up. We've got kind of TV reporters on one side, the newspaper journalists in the middle, and then politicians floating around already trying to, I guess, drop a few words in everyone's ear to try and be the chief cheerleaders for their man tonight. But of course, the big event, of course, kicking off at 7:30 with a forensic interview from Beth Rigby and then, of course, the audience Q&A as well. Why are we here? Well, it's worth talking about Grimsby for a moment, isn't it? Because the new Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes constituency is a key battleground in this election. The area turned Conservative for the first time since the Second World War in 2019. That was, of course, under Boris Johnson. And here on Sky News, we've been gauging the political mood here for the last 6 months. I've been up a couple of times, many of my colleagues as well, to really get under the skin of the place. Here's a little flavour. Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Politics Hub. We're here in the constituency of Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes.
A long way from the politics of Westminster.
It is going to be a fierce battleground in this election.
In 2019, the Conservatives took this area from Labour for the first time since World War II.
When Boris was here, he was like a film star. I don't think the others will quite get the same reaction.
What are the big issues that matter to you right now? Cost of living, bills forever going up and food going up.
The issue with the NHS.
People still can't afford to buy houses.
Invest in these towns up here more.
We're not picking up as a country, we're going back.
For me, it comes down to one word, hope. Hope that, things are going to change.
Just trying to get a bit of a sense about what people think about politicians.
Well, I can't say what I want to say because it's on the telly. But they promise you the world just to get you across, and then when they get in, you don't get notes.
Well, our national correspondent Tom Parmenter is here in Grimsby tonight. He joins us now. Tom, that sense of disillusionment, a real factor here in Grimsby.
It is, and as you can see, we've spent an awful lot of time here this year trying to understand just what are the people's priorities in this election in a corner of the country that feels that it has been overlooked for far too long. Well, we've been to cobblers' shops, to care homes, to allotments, to Grimsby Town Football Club, to the housing estates, to try and understand just what matters to people and what is going right and what is going wrong in their lives at the moment and what they want their government to do about it. That will be a big theme through the course of tonight as we get ready for this potentially really pivotal moment in this election campaign, in this new constituency. And I've spent some time this afternoon with some of the audience members who have gathered in Grimsby tonight for this event. And it is the people of this constituency that have made it happen by sharing their views so vividly over the last few months. And having spoken to a few of the audience members this afternoon, they are set and ready to go with some very tough questions for Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. And the one thing that I've really taken away from reporting from here throughout this year is that they are unvarnished political opinions that you get in Grimsby and Cleethorpes. They've got no time for the spin, no time for the waffly answers. They want direct honesty from the men on stage tonight.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, isn't it, Tom? I love the way you put it, sharing their opinions so vividly. Tom Parmenter there, who spent an awful lot of time in Grimsby in the last few months. Well, the Prime Minister has had a bumpy start to the election campaign, but the big question tonight, can Rishi Sunak seize the opportunity tonight to begin turning that around? Well, joining us now from the Conservative Party is the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, that is Gareth Davis. Thank you so much for being with us. So I guess the question is it all over for the Conservative Party, or can an event like tonight change the narrative of this election campaign?
It is absolutely not over. We're in it to win it, fighting for every vote. The only poll that matters, as you know very well, is on the 4th of July. Events like tonight allow the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, to set out who he is, his values of aspiration and hard work that were instilled in him from a young age, but it also allows him to set out the clear difference with Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. And obviously the biggest difference is on tax. We're going to cut tax, we're going to cut national insurance contributions.
You're not going to cut tax. I just got to come in there, because you're not going to, yes, you're going to reduce the amount that tax is going to go up by, but you're not planning on cutting tax.
So let's deal with this really directly. We are going to cut taxes on working people. So if you are in a job,
that's not what you said, though, is
pay
it?
national insurance contributions. And we did that at the last part of the Parliament. So in 6 months, we cut national insurance contributions for 29 million people, saving about £900 for the average earner. We want to go further, cut another 2% off national insurance for people in work, but we also want to abolish national insurance for the 4 million self-employed people, because they're the ones taking the risk in our economy.
You said at the beginning of the interview that it's not all over. You're in it to win it. If that is the case, then why is Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, going out on the broadcast airwaves to say that actually it's all about making sure that Keir Starmer doesn't get a super majority? That's not the script, is it?
Well, what he's saying is, don't write a blank cheque for Keir Starmer. Don't vote for something you don't know what he's going to do.
I mean, it doesn't sound like that's a party trying to win. It sounds like that's a party trying not to lose really badly.
No, we are absolutely trying to win, believe me. And I think the other thing that Grant was pointing out was that a vote for anybody other than the Conservative Party will allow Keir Starmer into 10 Downing Street. And we know that that comes with increased taxes. We know that income comes with lots of other things that are not going to be good for families across Britain. So that's what he's saying.
And you think that tonight could be a game changer then in the election, do you?
I think any opportunity that Rishi Sunak has to engage with the public, he does really well, because he is ultimately not just a nice guy, but he's somebody that is deeply driven by core values, and you can see that in the policies he's putting forward in a very detailed manifesto, and he will take the opportunity tonight to set that out.
Looking forward to that. Thank you very much indeed, Gareth Davis, there speaking to us as we build up to the main event, because there's just over 3 weeks to go until the election. And of course, there is, just to take a quick time check, just around 18 minutes to go until our main event here kicks off, the Leaders event here on Sky News, where you will get the chance to directly compare both Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. And that matters, because although it might look like, according to the polls, that Keir Starmer's cruising to a comfortable win, there are always some tough tests on the road to Downing Street, and one of them, of course, comes tonight. We can talk now to the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. Good to have you here in Grimsby. So, I mean, I guess it's Keir Starmer's to lose tonight, is it?
Well, the great thing about tonight's format is that, as well as questions from Beth, we also get questions from the audience. These are the sorts of interactions Keir really enjoys, and it's a chance for us to do two things, I think. One is to get across Labour's message of change and how we'll bring it about in terms of the policies. And secondly, to make sure that people get the message that the only way this country gets the change we need is if people vote for it. And I think it's been extraordinary this morning to hear a senior cabinet minister effectively throwing the election, saying, oh, the Conservatives, we've got to just try and stop this landslide Labour majority. I mean, this is a deliberate calculation to try and persuade millions of people who are undecided, but in fact the whole country who haven't yet voted, that change is inevitable and therefore you don't have to go and vote for it. And, you know, our message is simple. The country needs change. We will only get that change if people vote for change by voting Labour.
It is fair to say that the polls are pointing towards a Labour win right now. It's on you, isn't it, to level with people and to be really, really honest about what the next 5 years will look like if you win the election. And let's be honest, Labour talk about growth, they talk about planning reforms, but are you talking about the real difficult decisions that would face you if you are to win the election? Public spending cuts, tax rises.
Yeah, to be fair, we've been honest about those choices for some time. I'm regularly inundated with people saying, I want you to promise X or Y, either on health or more broadly. And I think when people see the manifesto tomorrow, they can take two things from it. One is that every policy that's in there is a promise we can keep and the country can afford. And secondly, there'll be things that they might have wanted us to do that won't be in there because the state of the public finances is so appalling that there are good Labour things we'd have liked to do, but because we can't guarantee we'll deliver it in the first term of a Labour government, it's not made the manifesto. And therein lies the difficult choices and the honesty with the public about the state of the finances. And what a contrast with what we saw yesterday, which could see people's mortgages rising by £4,800.
15 minutes to go. I just want to squeeze in one final question to you. Big event. You know Keir Starmer. How's he been preparing? Give us any little nuggets, any detail?
Well, I saw him yesterday when Keir was trying to get me to brush my teeth in front of a class full of kids and then do star jumps in the playground.
Did you do it?
No, I bloody didn't. I think it's fair to say Keir is enjoying himself on the campaign. He's loving being out on the campaign trail. He sees tonight as a great opportunity to show, I think, the wider country who don't see him in person on the campaign trail how much he enjoys interacting and answering the questions and setting out Labour's stall.
We'll see if he does any star jumps after that interview with Beth Rigby. Let's see how he gets on. Wes, thank you very much indeed. Wes Streeting, there, the Shadow Health Secretary. We are just moments away now from a debate that could prove decisive in this election campaign, with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer preparing to go on stage. Here's Sarah J. Mee with a little bit more on what we have in store for you.
Stage is set for the battle for number 10, live from here at Grimsby Town Hall. We're in this wonderful main hall. It's over 160 years old. What a setting for the two leaders to put their case to you as to why they should be your next Prime Minister. Well, these are the chairs that will be occupied by our political editor, Beth Rigby, and Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. Beth is going to put the two men through their paces, and then we'll open up questions to our assembled audience here of around 100 people, many of them from right here in Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, this new constituency, which is vital to both men in this general election, and also people from right across the UK, from right across the political spectrum. It's going to be a really intense 90 minutes. Hope you join us, 7:30, right here on Sky News. See you then.
Well, you at home, I'm sure, will be watching very carefully, and here in the spin room, we are going to be watching very carefully as well. Just want to show you around because look, you can see the kind of TV crews on this wall here. You've got lots of newspaper journalists, hacks, John Craig, Alan Bolton, a few familiar faces as well too, and a few politicians floating around as well. And there's a couple of people that I just want to have a little chat to. Three lovely ladies that I can bring you. It's so lovely to have you guys here. We're getting really excited, aren't we? So Kitty Donaldson, first, talk to me. You're from, where are you working from at the minute?
I'm working for the I newspaper and I'm the chief political commentator.
And what are you going to be looking for from tonight?
I think I'm on gaff watch actually. I mean, today has been quite a good day for Rishi Sunak. I think he hasn't, punched a pensioner or kicked a golden Labrador or something, anything like that. So I'm looking out to see what he's going to be saying to the public, and also looking out for Keir Starmer on taxes. So I think we need more from Keir on what his tax pledges are.
Yeah, let's talk to Alva Ray next. Tell us the publication that you're working for and what you're looking out for tonight. Feel free to be as colourful as Kitty, by the way.
Well, I'm from Bloomberg News, and I mean, we all love these things for how unpredictable they are, don't we? And I think that's what I'm looking forward to. I love that you've given a really big chunk to audience questions. That was something that Keir Starmer did a bit better on than Rishi Sunak last time. We know that overall, polling suggested that Rishi Sunak won that last contest, but the voters found Keir Starmer a bit more empathetic. I think it'll be interesting just with members of the public, whatever they come up with. I think there could be a few curveballs. I think that could really cut through.
Yeah, I love the chaos as well. The audience questions are always so unpredictable. They are actually I love the Beth interview is going to be brilliant, forensic, but then it's that kind of slight, you just never know where it's going to go, do you? I think that's the thing. Claire Ellicott, firstly say where you're from and what are you looking out for?
I'm from the Daily Mail, and what I'll be looking for is Keir Starmer to see whether he improves his performance from last time. He really struggled to kind of articulate his case last time. Rishi was quite punchy, and it's just to see whether Keir's learned the lessons from the last time, whether he can sum up what he thinks quickly and whether he can fight back on the attack.
And my other question, I guess, is does anyone here think that the election is not a foregone conclusion, that actually something like an event like tonight can change anything? You're nodding, you think?
Well, I mean, look at the polls. They do seem like they're quite immovable. But there is a chance that a huge gaffe, as Kitty says, could blow all of this up. If something mad happened, perhaps, things could change. But we will see tonight. It's a really good format, so I think we'll have to see who's strength plays.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's great to chat to you all. We'll come and try and find you afterwards as well. But as you can see, things really starting to get buzzy here in the spin room. Ed Conway, our data and economics editor, told me earlier he had FOMO, but let's bring him in, shall we? Ed, with his big screens and his data. What are you looking forward to tonight, Ed?
Yeah, I've still got FOMO, Sophie. But I will say, if you're watching and you listen and you think, oh, does that number actually add up? Does it really make sense? Well, stay tuned, because we're going to have a lot of charts showing you, kind of basically fact-checking a lot of the claims we're going to hear about from these two people, including things like this. This is the tax burden, the total amount of tax we pay across the UK, going back a long way. The Conservatives, just yesterday, would like you to believe that they're bringing it down. But in reality, and we showed you this just a few minutes after their manifesto, in reality, look, it is still, under the Conservative plans, going to go up to the highest level in 80 years. So we're going to be showing you that kind of analysis. And it's not just the Conservatives, by the way. Have a look at this. We've also got the Lib Dems numbers on tax, and also the Green Party. Their plans for tax are so extreme that they've broken my chart. I've actually got to have a new axis which takes this and shows you that they're talking about the highest tax burden ever. One line we don't have from there is the Labour Party, because we don't have their manifesto yet. And that's why tonight it's going to be really interesting. We're going to hear more from Keir Starmer about their plans. And as I say, if you detect some porky pies, fear not. We will be dissecting the porky pies here in the studio on the big screen momentarily after the debate. I realise now that doesn't sound very appetising, does it? But I promise it will be good.
Ed, thank you very much indeed. Ed Conway there, crunching through the numbers, and Ed, of course, is going to be fact-checking any of the claims that are made in the debate tonight, so definitely worth sticking around to see his analysis too. Well, joining us now here in the spin room, where things are getting noisier, the atmosphere is really building, two people who know a thing or two about how to run a campaign and also to prepare for nights like this. They also know the leaders pretty well too. Lee Kane, who worked as Boris Johnson's Director of Communications while he was in Downing Street, and also for Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor, and Tom Baldwin, a former Director of Communications and Strategy at the Labour Party, who's also written a biography of Sir Keir Starmer. Great to have you both with us. Lee, is it all over for Rishi Sunak, or is there anything that he can do tonight to change the narrative?
So I think in terms of winning this election, I think it's all over for the Tories at this point. And I think we've seen from the, don't give Keir a supermajority line, they've accepted that. So what tonight will be about will be how much of that core vote can we retain, for the Conservatives retain, and how can they reduce the Labour majority? Because all that will matter for, the 5 years ahead.
And how about Keir Starmer? What's Keir Starmer got to do this evening? I mean, I guess it's partly about not making any gaffes and mistakes, but then also, if he is going to be Prime Minister after the next election, does he need to start levelling with people about what that would look like?
I think he's going to try and set out more of that forward-looking plan, which I think people said they wasn't really present in last week's debate. He does have a plan. He's got these 6 first steps, but he's going to emphasise that only the first steps. Because he'll talk about the inheritance he's got, how it's really difficult. This is not 1997. It's not things are always going to get better. I think the potholes thing that they announced today is really interesting, because that's about saying, look, that matters to a lot of people, and we can fix some things. We can't fix everything, but we can fix something which really matters to people, and lots of people around the country.
We were having a really interesting chat earlier on when we were talking about how leaders prepare for these debates, and both the guys here were admitting that it was quite fun to play, interrogators and throw a few punches at their bosses, or like try and draw a bit of blood. How important is the preparation?
I think preparation is key. It's train hard, fight easy attitude. I think when you're into these debate rooms, you don't want anything coming at you that you've not thought about, because I think that's where always the problems comes, and that's why the public side is so much trickier, because you really don't know where someone will take it, and there's often real-world experience behind it. It's not a presenter like yourself with a grilling. It's someone who's got a personal story. So there's a sort of need for that kind of emotional, empathetic element, and it shows a different side to a politician that you can't train for.
It's going to be really interesting to see that from both men. We are out of time, but we're going to have lots more from you after the debate and your analysis of how it's gone. I'm looking forward to that indeed. So we're going to have lots more, of course, from Lee and also from Tom. We can now, I think, bring in someone who really, actually, I was going to say we can bring in Adam Bolton, but I can actually see him chatting away in the corner, so I'm not sure we can actually bring in Adam Bolton right now. But certainly things are really building up before the debate that is going to happen in only 6 minutes' time. The last preparations are going to be going on right now. Both men perhaps having a bit of a quiet time before they face the grilling. Firstly, of course, from our political editor, Beth Rigby, and then, of course, the 25-minute grilling from the audience, which is in many ways the most unpredictable part of tonight's event. We do have Adam with us now. Adam, a very, very quick thought from you. What does Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer need to do?
I think Rishi Sunak, in a sense, needs to do the same thing as Keir Starmer, which is to just enthuse people a bit. I mean, looking at the opinion polls, he's got further to go, but on the other hand, the mood is largely against him rather than in favour of Keir Starmer. So I think Keir Starmer, looking at the realities, looking at what's been said this morning, he just needs to show that he would be a good Prime Minister. That's really, I think, his task tonight.
And do you think events like tonight can change elections?
Yeah, I think you can always make a major slip-up. I mean, who would have known that simple task of going to D-Day could be so damaging? You never know. And I think particularly reacting to ordinary people's questions is always tricky.
So key. Adam, thank you very much indeed. Right. Time to get ready, because we are about to go live to the debate room. I'm so excited. I wonder how Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are feeling right now. Beth Rigby, of course, getting prepped, our audience as well. The battle for number 10 is coming up next. The battle staging is up. So Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are in the building. The battle for number 10, something that could be decisive in this election campaign. That is coming up.
Big stories don't always come from big cities.
I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent, and this is where I grew up. We can reveal that the driver who hit Harry Dunn is 42-year-old Anne Sakoulas.
Just met the president and we never thought we'd get this far.
This is what they're up against, that the wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have.
What would you do if this place wasn't open?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
I never knew they would make it. It's amazing.
Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Good evening from Grimsby in north-east Lincolnshire. This is Sunak versus Starmer live, the battle for number 10. Welcome to Grimsby Town Hall, where we're joined tonight by the two men vying for the keys to Downing Street, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer.
We're also joined by a live audience, many of them from here in Grimsby. Sky News has been reporting from the town throughout this election year, finding out what matters most to people here. It's exactly the kind of seat both our candidates this evening need to win. So, here's how it's going to work. Over the next 90 minutes, the Conservative and Labour leaders will each be put through their paces by our political editor, Beth Rigby, before facing the questions you want answered.
Schools, housing, the list is endless.
Childcare, education, NHS.
We want some change from what is there today.
More provisions for the children with special educational needs.
Pay attention to the voice of the people.
They just need to get their stuff together a little bit.
We just can't support all this immigration.
And cost of living just getting worse and worse and escalating.
They said they were going to stop the boat. They haven't stopped one boat.
I feel so much for the young. What are they going to do?
We can't afford to live, we can't afford to eat, and we can't afford to go into higher education.
More job opportunities in the local area.
People I just need a bit more listening to.
Get your act together and sort the country out.
We've drawn lots to decide who should go first this evening, and it is the Labour leader, Keir Starmer. This is the battle for number 10.
Keir Starmer, thank you so much for coming to Grimsby
tonight. Thank you for having me on, and thank you to the audience for being here.
Well, let's kick off. You told the country Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. You then expelled him from Labour. You campaigned for a second EU referendum. Now you don't talk about the EU. And you dumped all the left-wing policies pretty much you once loved. Your short political career is a catalogue, actually, of broken promises and changed positions. So how can the people in this room trust anything you say?
When we lost the 2019 election, we lost very badly as a political party, including here in Grimsby, where people felt that they couldn't vote for the Labour Party. And I concluded that I should listen to the electorate, and when you lose that badly, you don't look to the voters and say, what on earth do you think you were doing? You look at your party and say, we have to change.
Do you get the trust issue?
The change that I wanted to bring about, and I have brought about, is to change the Labour Party, to put it back in the service of working people. And what has guided me through that at all times is that the country must come first and the party second.
You get
and so I've had to take difficult decisions to change our party. But that has guided me through.
But, Sir Keir, you get there's a trust issue here with voters. You accept that?
No, because what I would say is this. I decided it must be country first. So every decision after that, I judged previous decisions, previous positions, and I said, is this truly country first, party second? And if the answer to that was no, then I changed the position and dragged my party back to the service of working people, because I want this time round to put a Labour Party in front of people here in Grimsby and across the country that they know is a credible party that is putting the country first and has a clear plan for the future. And that's been the hard work I've done over the last 4.5 years.
Let's just go through that, because in the last two general elections, you asked people to elect Jeremy Corbyn as their Prime Minister. You said, I do think Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. Jeremy Corbyn, did you mean that?
I was certain that we would lose the 2019 election.
That wasn't my question.
I was certain that we would. I was certain that we would lose it. I did campaign for Labour, of course I did. I will openly say I campaigned for Labour. I wanted good colleagues to be returned into the Labour Party.
When you said it.
And I wanted a party that was capable of being changed so we could face the future again.
Did you not mean it when you said it?
I was certain that we would lose, and I think many other people were certain that we would lose.
So you didn't mean it?
I was certain that we would lose.
So you said it because you didn't think he would be Prime Minister anyway?
Of course I campaigned for the Labour Party at the last election and the election before that, the one before that. I've always campaigned for the Labour Party, and I'm glad I did because I wanted good colleagues to be returned to have their seats so that we could fight for the future of the Labour Party.
I will move
so
on.
I make no apology for that. I fought for the Labour Party at the last election.
I'm just trying to make the point to everyone in here that you said that he would make a great Prime Minister. Now will you actually say, yes, I thought that, or I didn't think that at the time? Just be honest.
I honestly didn't think that we had a chance of winning that election.
So you said it anyway.
I wanted to campaign for our colleagues, and I then, once we got the result that we did, which were the results that I expected that we might get, as I say, I decided to step up to lead the party, not something I had planned to do when I came into Parliament, and to change it and to put it back in the service of working people.
The reason and we will move on, it's a trust issue, right? Because
Well, look, let me deal with this issue. I went to Northern Ireland and worked with the police service over there. I said I would work with the team to change it, and we did. I then ran the Crown Prosecution Service. I was the Chief Prosecutor for 5 years. I said we would change the Crown Prosecution Service, make it better, particularly on violence against women and girls. I changed it. We did it. I said I would change the Labour Party 4.5 years ago. Most people said to me, you can't do it. I did. So I stand on my record.
OK. So, OK, let's just go to your record, because I'm going to run you through your record because people have to judge whether to vote for you. Your past political record, when you stood for election as leader, you did so on the basis of 10 pledges. They were very left-wing. A couple abolished tuition fees, common ownership of energy, water. Did you write these pledges, Sir Keir?
Yes, and I put them before the membership of our party. Most of them are still in place. I said that they were bound up with
economic 6 or 7 of them, actually.
Justice. No, that's not entirely true. But look, I'm not going to shy away. Have I changed my position on those pledges? Yes, I have, because I've asked myself, honestly, are these country first, party second? And if the answer to that question is no, then I've changed them, because I think this party should always put the country first. But the other thing I'd say, Beth, because I do think this is important...
But do you think they're wrong in principle?
Well, let's take energy nationalisation, which a lot of people think we should nationalise our energy companies. They're making a huge amount of money. Lots of people are paying a fortune on their bills. 2 years ago, at the height of the crisis, when people were facing very high bills, I said to my team, well, mock up for me, tell me how much it will cost to nationalise the energy companies. That ran into tens of billions of pounds, and I had to take a decision, which is, do we use tens of billions of pounds to pay off shareholders to nationalise the company, but not have any money to reduce your bill? I thought that would have been the wrong decision. I think most people watching this here or on the television would say, for heaven's sake, here, if it's a choice between keeping my bills low or paying off shareholders tens of billions of pounds, there's only one choice you can make. And that's what I mean by country first, party second. I changed my mind. It was too expensive. I wanted to get the bills down.
We need to get to the audience questions, so let me rattle through this bit, if you don't mind. One of the pledges you can definitely afford to do, in fact, you might want to do, given the state of public services, is to raise tax on the top 5% of earners. That's anyone earning over £80,000 a year. Why did you ditch that? You can do that. That money would be useful. It could make £2 to £3 billion a year for the public purse.
Let me be really clear about tax, because this has been a big issue in the last 3 weeks. So let me be absolutely clear. All of our plans are fully costed, fully funded. We will not raise tax on working people. That means no tax rises for income tax, for national insurance, for VAT. Our manifesto comes out tomorrow. It's a very forward-looking manifesto, but there's nothing in our manifesto that requires us to raise tax.
You've swerved the top 5% of earners there.
Nothing requires us to raise tax. And I tell you, I do want to... You're challenging me and I want to deal with this. I want to do things differently. I want to grow our economy. I accept that previous Labour leaders have sort of pulled the tax lever every single time and driven up spending. I want to grow our economy. The manifesto tomorrow will be a manifesto, a plan for wealth creation. Now, you may not hear a Labour leader say that very often, but for me, that is the most important thing.
And
therefore, I'm not going to do what other Labour leaders have done and be tempted to simply say every time we're going to pull the tax lever. We're not going to do that.
Let's have some tax honesty, because you often say the country's public services are broken. Many people, I think, in this room will agree with that. That's why many people also suspect when you're in power, you will raise more tax. And I want you to be honest here, please. You've said you'll raise specific taxes on profits on oil and gas companies, closing loopholes on tax avoidance, tax reform on private equity, VAT on private schools. But the Tories say you will go further. They're right, aren't they? You will.
Well, the first thing I'd say is the Tories are in no position to lecture anyone about tax rises. We've got the highest tax burden for 70 years. And I think that working people shouldn't pay more tax and we will not raise their tax. What we need to do is get the economy going. There's a reason that taxes have gone up so much in recent years, and that's because the economy is flatlining. We have to address that problem. And tomorrow our manifesto is a plan for growth, a detailed plan of the first steps we will do in government to get our economy working so that living standards go up and we have the money we need for our public services.
So no tax rises of any kind in the next Parliament under Labour?
No tax rises for working people, and nothing in our manifesto requires tax rises over and above those that we have specifically set out.
No tax rises in the next Parliament?
No tax rises needed in the plans in our manifesto.
In the plans?
No tax rises for working people. That's income tax, national insurance,
so you're
and VAT.
not ruling out. I just decode that for you guys, because when a politician says no plans, it does mean I might.
Well, Beth,
I've done this a bit. It does.
Look, I'm not going to sit here tonight and write the next 5 years' worth of budgets, and you wouldn't take me seriously if I did. What I will say is that we will not raise
tax. And you've ruled out NI.
Yes, because
so you are ruling out some tax rises, but not all.
Because I think working people are paying too much tax, and I think paying far too much tax in recent years.
What I'm hearing
and I think that has made the cost of living crisis 10 times worse than it would otherwise be.
What I'm hearing is that you are not ruling out some tax rises, and you've talked about working.
But I have said that none of our... We're going to unveil our manifesto tomorrow. No tax surprises.
I got it.
There's going to be no need to raise tax from the plans we're setting out.
But the point is there are other taxes that affect working people, aren't there? What about council tax? I'm sure many people are worried about that, yeah? The Labour Party in Wales launched a review of council tax banding. Are you going to rule out a review in England too?
Well, council tax is too high for many people. It's been going up. It went up again this year, but that's because the government lost control of the economy.
So you're not going to do a review of the council tax bands?
I'm really...
You know, they were last revalued when I was a teenager, and I'm really old now.
Yeah. Beth, you're pushing me over and over again on tax. I'm not wanting to raise tax. I think people are taxed too much already. What I want to do, my central mission, is to grow the economy. I'm not going to apologise for that, because I genuinely think that if you don't grow the economy, then you're taxing an ever-diminishing return.
I mean, people here will be worried about fuel duty, right?
Yeah.
The Conservatives have frozen it since 2011. If you unfroze it, you could get, £5 to £6 billion. That's a tax on working people.
Yes, and that's why
you are going to freeze it?
Every single budget, we have supported the freeze on fuel duty.
And you will continue to do that as Prime Minister if you would win?
We have to concentrate on growing the economy. On fuel duty, that has to be decided budget by budget. But my track record is we've supported...
he's going to do it or not? I don't know.
We've supported the cap on fuel duty every single time it's come up.
OK.
But I want to do things differently. If we just do things in the same way as we've done for the last 14 years, we'll end up in the same mess. I'm not prepared to do that. This election is an election about change, about doing things differently, about growing the economy and making sure we create the wealth so this country can run our public services. And
I'm going to have one more go.
I ran a public...
we can end
No. I do want to finish this. I ran a public service for 5 years. I ran a public service in the austerity years. I know what it means to be a public servant. I absolutely care about our public services. My wife works in the NHS, my mum worked in the NHS, and I know what it means to the NHS. But so I absolutely want our public services to function. I believe in them. I worked in them for 5 years.
I've heard the specifics on certain taxes, but to be clear, council tax revaluation, which could put up council tax bills, fuel tax, you know, you're not being explicit on it. And that is your prerogative. But what about capital gains tax? That's the tax you pay when you sell a valuable asset like shares or a second home. If you made capital gains tax the same level as income tax, you could raise £14 billion a year. That must be attractive to you if you want to repair public services.
That is not in our manifesto. That is not a choice that we are making. It will not be unveiled tomorrow. There's no surprises in our manifesto, because our manifesto is a manifesto for growth. It's about how we tackle our planning laws, how we get the skills for our young people, how we set up Great British Energy. This is going to be a publicly owned energy company, so that taxpayers' money that goes into investing in energy comes back to the taxpayer. These are the ideas that we have that I want to put on the table to grow our economy for the future.
Just the reason I'm asking you this is, I don't know if you remember that interview we did in September 2021 when I asked you about wealth taxes. You said people who earn their money from properties, dividends, stock shares, they should be looked at. We need to look at a range of options, and that includes the way people earn their money. So you were looking at wealth taxes. You are looking at wealth taxes. It's OK to say it.
We're not looking at wealth taxes. Nothing in our manifesto will require tax flows. You'll see it for yourself.
You won't rule it out.
Let's test this tomorrow. I invite all of you, please, if you get the chance tomorrow afternoon, have a look at the manifesto. We're launching it tomorrow morning, and you will see for yourselves that every single thing is fully costed, fully funded, and they do not involve tax. So we're going round and round in circles.
Well, no, you all know too that
if
it's not ruled out in the manifesto, it's on the table. So let's just carry on. What about you? Personally, you earned £128,000 in tax last year. You paid £44,000 in income tax. That puts you in the top 2 to 3% of earners. Would you personally be happy to pay more tax?
Yes, of course.
OK.
I've always paid my tax in full. But, you know, and I accept I earn a lot of money in the job I am now in. But when I grew up, my dad was a tool maker. He worked in a factory. It's true. My mum was a nurse, and actually we couldn't make ends meet, which actually isn't a laughing matter. We couldn't make ends meet. We couldn't pay our bills. I know what it feels like to feel anxious about the next bill which you can't pay. And a lot of what I recognise is a lot of people today are in precisely the same position as I was in. Politics is about your policies, of course it is, but it's also about who do you have in your mind's eye when you make your decisions? Who are you thinking about when you make your decisions? I'm thinking about the people who are struggling with their bills. I'm thinking about working people who deserve a better Britain. I'm thinking about working people who want their living standards to go up. And our plan for the country, which we will set out tomorrow, is a confident, hopeful manifesto for change.
But I'm nearly finished. Because I want to come on to something that matters to working people, and that's child benefits. At the moment, just to remind you all, if you probably know, there's a 2-child benefit cap for families, some of whom have more children than that. This is hitting some of the poorest and most vulnerable in Britain. The Resolution Foundation think tank says families cannot claim about £3,200 per extra child a year. Dozens of organisations, from the Trade Union Congress to the Church of England to the former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, have called for it to go. Will you scrap it? Is that in your manifesto tomorrow?
No, it isn't. And it's been a really difficult decision for all the reasons you outlined, because the last Labour government had a laser focus on dealing with child poverty and did a huge amount of good work, including Sure Start and the programmes that were set up.
It cost £1.3 billion. All of those wealth taxes I was talking about, or the 5% on top earners, you could do that, and you could do that policy £1.3 billion a year.
Huge damage has been done to our economy under this government. Huge damage. And if we are able to come into government and form a government, we're probably going to inherit a broken economy, a broken NHS, broken public services, in fact, broken everything. And I'm not going to make promises that I can't keep. So I'm doing actually a difficult thing, which is saying to the electorate, saying to you now, I can't do something which I know the benefits of it. We need to deal with child poverty, and we will have a strategy for child poverty. But I think people are fed up with politicians who, before the election, say we'll do everything, and then after the election they don't deliver. So I've taken a decision,
Keir Starmer,
which is
just to be
before the
clear-
election. I'm going to tell you what we can't do, even though some of these things are good things to do. I
Sir
accept
Keir,
that.
I'm going
We're
to
not
interrupt
going to
now
do
because
it.
I'm nearly out of time. It would lift 1 million kids out of poverty, and just to be clear, you're choosing not to do it.
It's a difficult choice. We will have an anti-child poverty strategy, of course we will. The last Labour government did. We will have one. But the easiest thing in the world, it's what Rishi Sunak is doing, is to simply say you can have everything. Unfunded commitments, unfunded promises. That's what got us into this problem in the first place. And working people are paying the price with higher bills, their mortgages. I'm not prepared to have a Labour government ever make that mistake again.
Keir. Sir Keir, some people feel that they don't really know you. Some people say you change your mind all the time, and I hinted at some of that. Some people say you're boring and stiff. Tell me something. Tell me something, a morsel about yourself that will change people's minds.
Well, look, all my life I've believed in service. That is why I worked in Northern Ireland with the police service of Northern Ireland to ensure it had the confidence of both communities. I thought that was a really important thing. That's why I worked and headed up the Crown Prosecution Service, public service. That's why I came into politics when I finished as Director of Public Prosecutions and wondered what to do next. My wife was ringing adverts in the papers about, you know, well-paid lawyers' jobs, and I said, no, I want to serve my country, which is why at a late stage, actually, I came into politics to serve my country.
Was Vic, your wife, not keen for you to do this?
No, she wasn't at all. She
What
thought
does she think
it'd be
about
far
the
better to
prospect of
continue being a lawyer on a reasonable salary and not have all of the you know, challenges that you get as a politician. But I was clear in my mind. I wanted to come into politics because I wanted to serve my country. And I've waited 9 years now in opposition. I've worked 4.5 years to put my party back in a position where I can put it before you and others, the voters, as the only party that's got a plan for the future.
If you become Prime Minister in 3 weeks' time, what do you fear the most?
Oh, the only real fear, I suppose, I have is for my family. I've got a boy who is just turning 16. He's 15 3/4. I've got a girl who's 13. These are really difficult ages for children. If they're under 5, it would probably be easier. If they were 20 or over, it'd be easier. And my only fear, really, is the impact it's going to have on them. That's why we never name them in public, never have a photo shoot with them. I want them to be able to walk to school and have their own lives unaffected as much as I can by what I'm doing. And that, I don't fear the big decisions. In fact, I relish the chance to change our country. And on the first day, I want to start on our first steps. I want you to see the change that we can bring about. But my only fear is actually, and the only thing that sort of keeps me up at night is worrying about my children.
Any doubt that you're up to the job?
No, not at all. I've led different organisations, I've changed them, and I want the opportunity to change the country.
For us at the present, it's still not, after 15, 20 minutes, got on to the future and this growth process that you're going to go through.
Well, thank you for raising that, because we've got... What we've done is we've set out the big change that we want to make, but also what the first steps will be that we can do on day one. So the day after the election, I want to start on our first step, stabilising the economy to make sure we never go through a cost of living crisis like this before, set up Great British Energy so we can keep your bills down. I want to start on the 40,000 appointments each and every week that we need to get the waiting list down in our NHS. We will be doing that the morning after the election, and that is what I look forward to most.
Well, I do mean to interrupt. We've got to get to the audience questions. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for coming and doing that with us. And now you've got some harder questions from this lot.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Well, there you are, the audience questions getting underway a little bit early. You heard what Sir Keir Starmer had to say to Beth Rigby there. He said he was certain that Labour would lose that 2019 election, but he has put the party back in the service of working people, putting the country first, he said. He also insisted there's nothing in the party's manifesto, launched tomorrow morning, that would require them to raise taxes for working people. He said the party isn't considering wealth taxes, with all of their commitments fully costed. And he also said that he would personally be happy to pay more tax. Well, now it is your turn to put your questions to the Labour leader.
Right. Now, our first question comes from Sharon, who is from Grimsby. Sharon, where are you? There she is.
Sharon.
Take it away, Sharon.
So, as someone born and bred in Grimsby, I'm proud of our town, but it has some of the most disadvantaged areas in the country, with high levels of child poverty, inadequate social housing and increasing numbers having to use food banks. How will Labour address these inequalities and improve outcomes for the most disadvantaged residents, both here and across the UK?
Well, thank you for that. And I've been to Grimsby a number of times now, and my strong impression is that you're absolutely right about the challenges that people are facing, and we've had discussions about that even this morning with various groups around Grimsby, the very real challenges, the cost of living crisis, the challenge that people have with schooling and with health. But what I've also been struck by is the pride and ambition that people have in their place and in Grimsby, and the sense that they want a government that matches their own ambition. I think the way to do that is to ensure that the government works with local communities, local businesses. We need a growth plan for Grimsby, which your fingerprints are on. I don't want someone standing in Whitehall and Westminster looking at a map and deciding what they think is best for Grimsby, because I think with people with skin in the game are the people who make the best decisions. So I want a government that partners with you, drives through the change, creates the conditions for businesses to thrive. If that means changing the planning rules so we get our roads sorted out, the congestions and the potholes are an absolute nightmare. Create the conditions for businesses to thrive. I was really struck, the time before last I was up here, I was looking at some of the offshore wind turbines and talking to apprentices here in Grimsby. Brilliant young people, by the way, who all lived within about 20 or 30 minutes, of where they're working. And they were very skilled going out to maintain those wind turbines. We need more of that. The supply chains for that should be in and around here, so they're not other parts of the country or abroad. That's the sort of challenge that I relish. It's what I want to do on day one, which is to get to this place where I can roll up my sleeves, work with you, have the respect to listen to what you're saying here, not sit a long, long way away and make decisions about what should happen in Grimsby. And I'm convinced that if there's a government that has ambition that matches the people of Grimsby, we can move this forward very, very quickly. And I can see some of the green shoots there already, because some of the work that's going on, we had a round table this morning with some of the businesses, the community groups here in Grimsby that were telling me not just the struggles and the challenges, but what they were doing about it. I want to roll up my sleeves and work with them and to say the government is on your side. That would be a massive difference to the last 14 years.
How it's all going to be funded? If tax is not going up, how are you going to fund it?
We need to put money and resource into Grimsby. We need resource decision-making to come. So we have to be bold enough in government to release that so that there's more power here in Grimsby. They're difficult things to do. Governments haven't done that in the past, but we have to do that. Some of it we can do straight away. The potholes that are driving everyone mad because their cars get damaged, it costs them hundreds of pounds, and if you need your car or your van for work, it's a complete nightmare because you can't actually use it. That can be done straight away. We've been setting out our plans on that. Childcare came up this morning in a discussion I was having. We want to create 100,000 new places for childcare. This is 3,000 nurseries around schools, because I think primary schools are the best place for nurseries, so that means children get the opportunity to develop the skills that they need before reception year, which isn't happening in the way it should at the moment, in my view. But also, parents and carers can go back into work, which many of them want to do, and that then helps the local economy. There are things that we can do. Goes back to my point. We've got first steps, the things we want to do the day we get into government. If we're elected in, that I want to start, and I've said to my shadow cabinet, I want you to prepare months ago for the first day in government. I don't want you picking up the phone on day one. I want to know you're ready. And that's why I'm so confident that we can do this as soon as we get the chance, if we do get a chance, to bring about the change this country so desperately needs.
OK, thank you. I've got so many questions.
That's all right.
Look at them all. Oh, so many questions. And the next one comes from Jonathan. He's a junior doctor from Leeds. Jonathan, there he is. Thank you.
So I've been on strike because I earn more money per hour working part-time as a university student than I do as a newly qualified doctor. Abysmal pay, conditions and morale mean that more of my colleagues than ever are planning their exit, and I worry about what this means for my loved ones and the wider general public. Scotland and Wales have decided that they can pay NHS doctors fairly. How and when will you commit to doing the same in England?
Well, we won't be able to do anything unless we win the election. We've obviously only been in opposition so far. I have been frustrated, if I'm honest, that these strikes have gone on as long as they have gone on. The strikes are very bad for patients. People are very anxious about the strikes. I don't think doctors want to be on strike. As I said earlier, my wife works in one of the big London hospitals, so I know firsthand and relayed every night the pressure that NHS staff are under. It's been unrelenting during COVID, unrelenting now because of waiting lists. So what we would do is, instead of arguing about who gets in the room first to negotiate with the doctors, we would roll up our sleeves in a grown-up way, get in the room and settle this dispute so that patients can get the care they need, doctors can get back to work and the country can move forward. Because we can't go on like this anymore. And the sooner we have a bit of grown-up politics in this, the better, I think, because we absolutely need to move forward as a country.
Are you going to pay them more?
No.
Are you going to pay them more? Because you've said that you won't meet their pay claims.
Well, the doctors say they want 35%, and I've had to say...
we don't. We want a path to pay restoration.
No, I get that, but again, I want to be straight about this.
Terms, yeah, and we're looking to make that... The 35% thing is not...
Pay, progression, conditions, and all of that can be negotiated. On the 35%, I don't think we can afford that as a country because of the damage that's been done to the economy. I don't want to pretend to you that we can. I'll sit down in a room and negotiate and find a way through this, just as has happened in other countries, because it's intolerable that we go on. But I'm not going to start with the proposition that we simply accept whatever the other side is asking for. That's not how negotiations go. And you wouldn't respect a government if it operated in that way. And other people in other walks of life have got constraints and pressures on their lives that have to be balanced. But will we be grown... All that's happened this year, and it's so frustrating, is the government say we want a deal, but we won't go into the room first. It's for the doctors to...
Never wanted a deal.
Well, I think you may be right. And the fact that they've left this to the election without fixing it and just booted it the other side of the election, I think is disgraceful. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do patients any good, and it doesn't do the country any good. But we've had a government that's chaotic, that's divided, has broken just about everything they've touched. I don't know a period in history, and you will all think about this, where almost everything is now in a worse state than when they started in government. And this is not about Labour or Tory. If you leave your country in a worse state than when you came into government, you should be booted out.
OK. I've got so many questions. I've got so many questions. The next one comes from Hussein from London. Where is he? There
Hussein.
You go, please.
Yeah. Hi. So I'm an average working parent from London, and I send my daughter to a private school, which in turn saves the government about £7,500 per year. But by now having to pay 20% VAT, we would be priced out, and we would have to send our children to state school. It in fact beats the objective of collecting tax. Rather, it increases the influx in public schools. So private schools is not only for the rich. I mean, the rich would continue sending their children. It's us who would have to make the change. And the ultimate losers in all of this are the children, who are meant to be our futures.
Yeah.
So would you reconsider taxing private education?
Look, let me be really clear about what we're doing here. I have nothing against private schools. I absolutely recognise that many parents work hard and save hard to send their children to private schools because they have aspiration for their children. I equally accept that every parent has aspiration for their children, whether they go to private school or not. But I absolutely respectfully want to make your point, because it is a concern. It's a concern to you and to other people. In our state secondary schools, we've got thousands of teachers missing in the subjects that we need. So in a state secondary school, let's take maths. Too many students, young people, children are being taught by maths by sports teachers, by supply teachers, and that's not acceptable. And for those children in a state secondary school who don't have the teachers they need, that's not a one-year problem or a two-year budgeting problem. It's a lifelong problem, because if they don't get the qualifications they need at 15 and 16, they can't go and do what they want. So we need to recruit 6,500 teachers for our state secondary schools to make sure every child, wherever they come from, whatever their background, whichever school they go to, has the same opportunity. And I'll be pressed when I say going to recruit 6,500 teachers. Beth and others will say to me, where's the money for that? And I say we will get rid of the tax break for private schools and use that money directly to fund those teachers in our state secondary schools. That's a political choice. It's actually a tough choice. I do understand what you're saying. I don't think it will lead to lots of people going to state education. We have done some analysis on this, but it's a choice. I think every single child, whatever their background, wherever they're from, should have the chance and to believe, genuinely believe, that success belongs to them. Yeah, of course.
But this would mean that you would tax the working parents who send their children to private school. Because the super rich will continue doing that. And it's only the working parents who will have to make a decision or pay the taxes.
The position at the moment is there's a tax break. So you pay VAT on other services, but you don't pay it for private schools. Now, I understand why that's been in place, but it's a tax break that we are removing. It's not an introduction of a new tax. We're simply saying we need to find the money to properly fund our state secondary schools so that in maths, to take an example, it's not the only example, I want every child to have a maths teacher teaching them maths, because it's the Prime Minister says he wants maths to the age of 18. Let's first get the right teachers for every single child up to 16, because at the moment they don't have it. And I genuinely worry, if you don't get maths at the right level in your GCSEs, it's really difficult to go on to A-levels. It's really difficult to go on to apprentices, and that child will be held back. Now, this is difficult stuff, but I'm not going to tolerate the fact that we haven't got the right teachers in our state secondary schools. That's the position we're in now. It's a disgrace in that position.
I'm going to interrupt you because I've got so many audience questions and I'm going to be in trouble with them if I don't get through them, and you'll be gone and I'm the one in trouble. So I've got Kerry from Grimsby. Kerry?
Yes, hi.
Kerry.
Hi. Good evening, Sir Keir. My NHS dentist practice went private and gave us a choice of either staying and paying private or finding a new practice. I've currently been on that waiting list for over a year with no idea of how long that waiting list is with my family. How would you fix this crisis and stop dentists from going to the greed of private?
We need to make sure that... this is a huge problem because we don't have enough NHS dentists for adults or for children, and some areas are deserts now where you simply can't get an NHS dentist. So we've got to fix this. The two things that we would do, three things, but the first is to make the money available for 700,000 urgent appointments in NHS dentistry, including 100,000 for children, which is desperately needed. The second is to incentivise newly qualified dentists to set up as NHS dentists by paying them money to put down their roots in the areas where they're most needed, so we can recreate those NHS dentist practice. We have to do this. In addition to the people who are frustrated in the way that you rightly are, I was genuinely shocked the other day. I went to Alderhay Children's Hospital. This is a brilliant hospital. Do you know what? For 6 to 10-year-olds, the most common cause of admission to hospital is rotting teeth, to have their teeth taken out because they haven't seen a dentist. It's a disgrace in 2024 England and Scotland and Wales. That was quicker, at least.
You were. Do you use a private dentist?
Well, we're at an NHS dentist practice, but I'm private because I'm an adult and therefore don't get it on the NHS, but our kids get NHS dentistry, and I believe in it.
OK.
The nearest one available is somewhere further than home.
Yeah, and that's the problem. You've got these vast areas where it's not just how much it is, it's also there just isn't a dentist there, which is why... And that, how have we got to this state in 2024 where basic things like dentistry are a problem in our country? I mean, what on earth has happened to get us to this place? We've got to fix it. I look forward on the first day we get into government to starting on this job. I find all of that much more interesting than all the sort of talking about what you're going to do. I just want to get on with the job.
The first day we get into government, bold. OK, next question is from Cayman, who's from Yorkshire. Cayman, where are you?
Hello.
Please go ahead.
Hi. I admired how in touch you were with the public when you were obviously a solicitor and then you became Director of Public Prosecutions with CPS. But over the last year, I feel like you've formed into more of a politician than the person that I would have voted for to run the country. You seem more like a political robot. How are you going to convince others like me to vote for you?
Well, the most... Look, all I can say... I went to run the Crown Prosecution Service. You referenced that. I was the Chief Prosecutor for 5 years, effectively bringing in every criminal prosecution in England and Wales, including here in Grimsby, in our courts to make sure that where people broke the law, they were prosecuted and you were kept safer as a result of that. Working, of course, with my staff. I worked before that in Northern Ireland, so I've had this constant theme in my life of trying to serve the public. That's why I worked in Northern Ireland. That's why I worked in the Crown Prosecution Service. That's why I took the decision to go into politics. I came into politics quite late in life. I'd done other things beforehand. But I took the decision that I couldn't take the issues, make the changes that I thought were necessary unless I went into politics. I was frustrated.
Do you think you've changed? Well,
I've been much clearer in my own mind that the country must come first and the party and party politics second. I'm really, I don't apologise for that. I think that's really important. I think it probably is a result of coming into politics late because I'm not tribally political. I actually do believe there are good people who vote other than Labour who want their family, their community and their country to go forward. And that's why I've said if we are to come into power, I want a decade of national renewal and I want everybody who wants the country to improve to feel that there's a place for them, whether or not they traditionally voted Labour, because I actually genuinely think that the vast majority of people in this country are reasonable people, they're tolerant people who sort of live and let live, and if given the chance would pull together to advance their community, to advance their family and to advance their country. And I don't think you need to be tribally Labour for that. I think you can actually pull the country together. And that would be a real moment for us.
I'm going to have to, because I'm...
Yeah, of course, that was a bit long. Apologies.
Cayman, did he convince you, yes or no?
I hope you don't answer the questions, how you answer the questions, and I hope you never answered them the way that you did when you were a solicitor, because you don't seem to answer the question.
OK. I'm gonna... OK, well, I'm going to need a speedy answer because we're nearly out of time, but I have Kieran from Guildford. You've got under the line. Where are you? Please, go ahead.
Good evening. Young people in this country have grown up knowing nothing but Conservative austerity and political chaos. We didn't have the chance to vote for Brexit in 2016 because we were too young, and now we're inheriting that economy. We're graduating from university, less likely to own a home than our parents, all while paying a higher effective tax rate because of student loans that wasn't a thing generations ago. How can you convince us that you are truly going to be different and actually effective at making change, not just in terms of the economy, but also to improve our trust in political institutions?
I need a quick answer, please. I need a quick answer, please.
First, by absolutely being clear that I understand the challenges that you are setting out. And that's because I do something which I think is underrated in politics and leadership, which is to listen, to use these, to listen to the challenges that people are talking to people. I go around the country the whole time. The most important thing I say to everybody I meet, please tell me the change you want if we're able to come into government, and I will mull that over in my mind on the train or in the car on the way back, because you have the right to put your fingerprints on what comes next. But just to address the specific things, we need good quality, high-skilled jobs for the future for our young people. That's why I was so impressed, and, you know, when I saw those apprentices here in Hull who had skilled jobs that they were proud of doing with a future to them. We need to make sure that we're building enough houses so that young people can get on the housing ladder. At the moment, the idea that you have to be in your mid to late 30s before you get your own roof over your head is a sign of a broken system, because I know from growing up how important it is to have your own home as a base camp for your dreams, your aspirations, for the security of your family. So we will build those 1.5 million homes. That will only happen if we partner with business, if we get rid of some of the planning rules that are in the way, and if we have a set of arrangements with mayors and combined authorities to get that building done. Because
Sir Keir,
otherwise, you simply will be in the same position.
I'm going to have to interrupt. Sir Keir, thank you so much for joining us in Grimsby tonight.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Well, that was Keir Starmer. Next up is the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Don't go anywhere.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent, and this is where I grew up. We can reveal that the driver who hit Harry Dunn is 42-year-old Anne Sakoulas.
Just met the President and we never thought we'd get this far.
This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
I never knew they would make it. It's amazing.
Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Welcome back to the battle for number 10, live from Grimsby Town Hall. We've heard from the Labour leader. Now it's the Prime Minister's turn.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us tonight in Grimsby.
Good evening, Beth. Thanks for having me.
PM, polling day is 3 weeks tomorrow, but it's rough, isn't it? A poll out this week put the Conservatives on 18 points, just about neck and neck with Nigel Farage's reform. And your polling is now worse than in the dying days of the Liz Truss government. What's going so wrong?
Well, I've got to say, Beth, it hasn't been an easy 18 months in general. So what I've done, though, is just keep going to try and do my best for people. And that's what I'm doing in this campaign. I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to everyone, not just tonight, but across the campaign, out and about in the country, about our plans for the future, because I know we've been through a tough time. Of course we have, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. It's been tough for all of you here tonight, everyone watching. But I do believe we've turned a corner, and we've got a clear plan for the future to make a difference to people, to cut their taxes, to bring down immigration, to protect pensions. Those are all things that I think matter. I think those are things that people want, and so I'm going to keep fighting hard till the last day of this election.
PM, Liz Truss never recovered from that disastrous mini-budget. Do you worry that your fateful decision to skip part of those D-Day commemorations could prove as terminal for you?
Well, the last thing that I wanted to do was cause anyone, and particularly our veterans community, any hurt or upset. It was a mistake, and that's why I apologised unreservedly for that. And, you know, I'm deeply sad to have caused people hurt and upset by that. I was privileged to participate in all the commemoration events that I did, to speak to many veterans, to thank them in person for what they did, but also make sure that I can demonstrate to them how committed I am to making this the best country in the world to be a veteran through all the things that we are doing in government.
And when you realised the mistake and you apologised, how were you feeling? Did you feel really awful? How was it for you?
Yeah, I was incredibly sad to have caused people hurt and upset. That was actually the last thing that I wanted to do, and as I said, I hope people can find it in their hearts to forgive me. When I realised I made a mistake, I apologised. I've asked for forgiveness, and also I have been speaking to veterans about the things that we are doing to make sure this is a good country for them after they've served, because we owe them an enormous debt of gratitude, and that's why I've made sure it's a priority to have a minister around the cabinet table to support them and focus on the things that matter to them.
OK. Prime Minister, let's go on to the Tory record. You say that you're the one who can deliver stability after all the turmoil, but for many voters, the Conservatives are the turmoil. In this Parliament, we've had 3 Prime Ministers, 5 Chancellors, 5 Home Secretaries, 6 Health Secretaries. How do we know that if you won the general election, you'd still be Prime Minister in a year's time?
Look, I can appreciate people's frustrations. Of course, we haven't got everything right. I don't think any government does, and I know it's been very difficult for many people. But what I can do is work as hard as I can to deliver the stability that I said I would. And I've had this job for 18 months, and I think particularly on the economy, as I'm sure we'll get into, people can see that inflation is back to normal, the economy's growing, wages are rising, and that's why we're having this election now, to talk about the future. And yes, I've got a track record over the past 18 months, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but also I want to build on that and continue the progress we've made, whether it's cutting people's taxes, bringing down migration,
I'd like to come on to that, Prime Minister.
Or indeed protecting people's pensions. These are all things that now we're in a position to make more progress on.
I'd like to come on to that, but many people do view Liz Truss's brief period in office as the symbol of that Tory chaos. Has her legacy cast a long shadow for you?
Well, I think if people are thinking about that, they can think about what I did. And you and I spent some time that summer, you interviewed me, I did an event like this at the time, because I disagreed with her economic policies. And actually it wasn't easy for people to hear what I had to say, but I believed very deeply then in what I was saying. And I went around the country then talking about it, doing events like this. We did one similarly together as well, and you interviewed me. And that's who I am as a person, even though that wasn't an easy thing, even though back then, actually, it was difficult for me and I was behind. I was talking about what I believe was right for our country, and that's who I am as a person, and I was right about that, and that's why people can trust me now when it comes to what I say about the economy today.
Well, look, let's get on to your pledges. Let's get on to you now. In January 2023, you made the British people 5 promises. You said no tricks, no ambiguity. We're either delivering for you or we're not. So I ask you to judge us on the effort we put in and the results we achieved. 5 promises. let's talk about the promises. Yeah. Promises 1 and 2, halving inflation, growing the economy. You've done that.
Well, the most important priority was the first one, because when I got this job, inflation was at 11%. And I think everyone knows the last few years have been difficult, the impact that was having on all your bills. Every week, you were seeing the impact in your shop, and that's why my priority was to bring down inflation, so to ease that burden. And it wasn't a given, and it was 11%. Now it's back to normal, ahead of our competitors, which is the result of a lot of hard work.
So let's just go through the pledges, because...
Yes, inflation is, of course, I know things are not easy. Of course I know that. They've been difficult for a while for all sorts of reasons, but what I was absolutely set about doing was making things that little bit easier.
Well, look,
that's why inflation was a priority. And it was precisely because the bills were continuing to go up that we needed to bring inflation down, and I'm pleased that we're able to do that.
Halving inflation, economy growing, tick, tick. Promise number 3, reducing national debt. It's gone up since you made the pledge, hasn't it? It has.
Yes, but it was always meant to come down over time, and that was always the time.
It's gone up. I know, but what was it when you made the pledge?
But we measure our debt according to an independent body measures our debt.
But it's higher now than it was when you made the pledge, right? It's high.
It was always forecast to be high. Let me be clear, Beth. I was never saying it would come down overnight. I was very clear at the time.
You made the pledge in January 2023.
And when I made the pledge...
And you're going into an election. I'm just making the point that you failed on that pledge as you go to the polls.
No, because when I made the pledge, I was very clear that we measure our debt reduction according to an independent body.
No tricks, no ambiguity.
No tricks, no ambiguity. None at all, right? We have an independent... I'm happy to explain. So we measure our debt reduction independently. It's actually not me that does it. It's an independent body called the OBR. We set out the fiscal rules to bring debt down over 5 years, and that's how they measure it. And they have confirmed at every budget, and you can go and look at it online, that we are meeting those fiscal rules. And when I made the announcement, I think you were there at the press conference when I did, I actually was asked the question, and I explained then, they said, how are you measuring this? And I said, we're measuring it according to the independent body which will adjudicate our rules. And we've met all those rules, because that's really important to me.
Let's crack on.
But no, just
Cutting NHS waiting lists, that's pledge 4. When you made the promise, the list was at 7.21 million. It's now at 7.54 million cases. It's gone up.
Yes, it has. Yes, I'm very good. We've not made as much progress on cutting waiting lists as I would have liked, and that was something that I was keen to do, and it has proved more difficult, and it's been proved more difficult for a number of reasons. Obviously, recovering from the pandemic is not easy, but we are now making progress. And actually, the number that you gave is just over 200,000 lower than it was a few months ago, because now...
It's gone up from when you made the pledge.
Yes, it has. It has. Yeah. I'm being very clear about that, but now it's coming down. Because we are now, the plans are working.
You made the pledge
We've resolved the industrial action.
And they're going up. OK, let's go to the 5th pledge.
Well, I think you had a question earlier from, I think there was a junior doctor here, and I think everyone knows the impact the industrial action has had. That's why we haven't made as much...
So it's the doctor's fault. The point... The time for... let's not dwell on this, but PM, the point is that when you made the pledge, there were several NHS industrial disputes happening at the time. Ambulance workers were on strikes, nurses had announced strikes, junior doctors were balloting, and you still made the pledge, and the numbers are up. Let's move on.
But having resolved all of the industrial action except the junior doctors, what you're now seeing is that the numbers are coming down. And we are making progress.
Junior doctors.
I might have not done brilliantly at maths at school, but I know that 7.2, 1 million, 7.5, it's going up. Let's move on. Let's move on, PM. Your 5th promise was stopping the small boats. Boat crossings are going up, aren't they?
Yes, they were down last year by a third. They're down over the last 12 months by a little less than that. This year, what we've seen is one particular country, Vietnam, accounting for the majority of the increase. But actually, the plans that we've put in place last year show that it is possible to make a difference to this problem, which, by the way, before I got this job, everybody said was impossible. Everybody said it was impossible to get the numbers down at all, but we showed last year that was possible. And now we have a clear plan to put a deterrent in place, and that means...
And I will come on to Roundup, but look, crossings have risen by 40% this year against last year to 11,247 people crossing on small boats this year. It's going to be a record year, you have failed to deliver on this pledge. Please acknowledge it.
No, if you look at the sum total of the time that I've been Prime Minister, because you've picked one particular period, if you look at the sum total of the time that I've been Prime Minister, the numbers are down.
The numbers were down on last year. The numbers in 2023 were down on 2022.
It's because of the work that we've done.
It's a record year this year. They've gone up by 40%.
But if you look at because these things are
is...
cyclical. Because what you've seen is one new country, Vietnam, accounting for a lot of the new arrivals.
All right.
And just as we dealt with Albania,
let's go back to basis. You said you were stopping small boats. Boat crossings are going up this year. Let's talk about Rwanda. You acknowledge that, don't you? OK, let's move on. You will get the flights off the ground in July. You promised that.
Yes.
Flights off the ground, no if, no buts. How many flights and how many people are you going to send over the summer?
Well, what we've done is already started detaining people. Airfield's on standby, planes are booked. The date for the first flight is out on the 24th, I think it is, of July. We haven't given more details beyond that to not compromise the operational security, but there will be a regular rhythm of flights, not just one. And the important point here is this is about establishing a deterrent, because I believe that if people come here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. We need to have somewhere safe to remove them, and that's how we will stop the boats. And that's what Rwanda is about.
Can I just ask you one thing? If you were so confident about getting these flights off in July, that this was the apex, really, of stopping the boats, why did you call an election before voters could actually see it was happening? Why?
Because an election is an important moment for our country, and my priority when I got this job was to restore economic stability. And we talked about bringing inflation down and getting the economy growing, and then being in a position, as we are now, to cut people's taxes. And for me, with that economic foundation established, it was the right moment to have an election to then discuss the future of our country. And this election is about the future. And you're right, on migration, there is a choice at this election, and elections have consequences. I've got a plan about what I want to do.
And I'm going to come on to that.
Keir Starmer doesn't agree with that plan.
Let's come on to that.
Can't tell you what he would do with illegal migrants, and that's a choice for everyone here and everyone watching. If you want to stop the boats, there's a choice of how you think that needs to be dealt with, and I'm the one that's got an answer for you.
And I would like to talk to you about a bigger issue that people are concerned about, which is legal migration. For many years, people were frustrated that immigration kept going up. It was the #1 reason for voters in the run-up to the EU referendum, one of the main reasons for Brexit. That's right, isn't it?
Immigration is too high.
No, one of the reasons people voted for Brexit was to take back control of our borders, right? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah? OK. Yes. OK. Well, let's just go and look at the record. Because what was the total net migration figure into the UK in the past 3 years?
You'll have it there, so...
But the audience, do you want me to tell them? Because they won't.
I don't have the number off the top of my head for the past 3 years.
It's 1.9 million people in the last 3 years. What was the total net migration figure in the last 3 years running up to the 2016 referendum when we had freedom of movement? Do you know it?
I don't have it offhand.
It was 836,000 people. And I'm sure many people in this room would have voted for Brexit. 70% of people in Grimsby voted for Brexit. How do you think they feel about that when they hear that net migration into this country has more than doubled in the last 3 years from before we left the European Union?
Yeah, I'm sure it's too high. I've been very clear that it's too high, and I'm sure people feel frustrated and angry about it.
You were the original Brexiteer, weren't you? Well, you were one of the...
Yes, I did support Brexit.
You were always a Brexiteer.
Yes, and I believe that was the right decision for our country.
Frustrated, cynical,
absolutely.
betrayed?
I just said I'm sure people feel frustrated about that. And again, the numbers are too high. Of course they're too high. What I can tell you is what I've done since I've had this job, and that's last year. Yes, and the numbers are too high. I'm not making any bones about that. The numbers are too high, Beth. But what I can tell you is what I've done in the time I've had this job is already start to bring them down because we've taken action to change things. So last year, the numbers were down by 10% already. And this year, the number of visas that we've issued is down by around a quarter. and the forecasts show that we're on track to halve net migration in just over a year's time. So that shows and hopefully gives people some confidence we're now heading in the right direction. To give you an example of some of the things we've done, we've clamped down on abuse of the social care visa, tightened up the number of dependents that students can bring, and also raised the salary so that you have to earn £38,500 to come here on a work visa.
Okay.
Now, these measures are now starting to have an impact. You've seen that this year, as I said, numbers down by a quarter, forecast to fall by a halve overall for net migration.
So are you making that pledge now? What's your promise to drive net migration down?
Yeah, well, what we've said we'll do is have actually a migration cap that's voted on in Parliament, so all your members of Parliament will vote every year on the number of migrants that will come. Well, that's, I said, the forecast at the moment is the numbers to halve, and then what we want to do is continue reducing it every year thereafter. But the key thing is here is there will be, for the first time, a legal cap on all migration so that we can guarantee that the numbers do continue to come down.
David Cameron, 2010, tens of thousands, reduced net migration. May 2017, Theresa May reduced net migration to tens of thousands. Boris Johnson, 2019, committed to making sure overall numbers come down below the then net migration figure of just over 250,000 people. Why should anyone believe anything that you say on immigration? Why?
And I can completely understand people's cynicism about this, but what you can add to the end of that list, since I've been in charge, numbers down 10% and visas issued this year down by a quarter.
Okay.
Right, so I've had this job for 18 months. Numbers were down last year. They're down considerably at the start of this year, and they will keep coming down because of the measures that I've already announced.
1.9 million people in the last 3 years. OK. But it's, you know, that's the record. Let's go on to tax. You say that you will cut taxes. I was at your manifesto launch yesterday. Our economics editor, Ed Conway, calculates that the tax burden on the country will be higher than it is now under a future Conservative government, even taking into account your proposed tax cuts. That's right, isn't it?
No, I haven't seen that analysis, and I'm not sure that is right. What we announced yesterday...
Is Ed wrong?
I haven't seen his analysis, so I can't comment on it because I haven't seen it. But what I can tell you is what our manifesto announced is, you know, tax cuts for people at every stage of their life, for people in work, for people who are setting up small businesses and self-employed, for those young people who want to buy their first home, for pensioners and for families. So tax cuts for people at every stage of their lives, because I believe people should keep more of their hard-earned money. That's how you build financial security. And again, that's a choice for people at this election. I believe in cutting people's taxes, now that we're in a position to do so, having restored economic stability.
Can I just have a moment of honesty about this, though? Because today, taxes as a proportion of national income are at 36.5%. They will be at 36.7% of national income by the end of the coming Parliament with all your changes. So I know that you have introduced tax cut, but overall, taxes will still be going up, won't they, under a Conservative government?
Well, the tax burden is too high, and that is a reflection of the decision.
Is it going up in the next Parliament? It will go up.
Taxes for people will continue to come down. That's the manifesto that we've announced. I haven't seen Ed's analysis. It's very hard for me to comment on it there. But what I can tell you is that the tax cuts that we've announced reduce the tax burden by about 1 percentage point of GDP a year compared to the spring budget last year. So again, I haven't seen his numbers. I can tell you my numbers, but I can give you...
So hang on, just to be clear. You're saying that taxes as a proportion of national income will come down at the end of the next Parliament under a Conservative government?
The tax cuts that we announced yesterday...
It's just a yes or no.
But I don't have a forecast for the economy in 5 years' time, but what I can tell you is stamp duty for first-time buyers, abolished. National insurance for self-employed, abolished. Further cuts for national insurance, the triple lock plus to cut taxes for pensioners. No, but these are the practical tax cuts that will be delivered, and they'll impact everyone in a slightly different way. But the choice at this election is clear, because I want to keep cutting people's taxes. And look, you did mention the tax burden. Actually, I can have a second to address that. Of course it's high, but that's because I had to take decisions that were difficult as Chancellor after providing the support that we did during the pandemic for the NHS, for furlough, but also for energy bills. And the reasonable thing to do, the right thing to do for the country, is to make sure that we secure our future and pay that back, and that requires difficult decisions.
Isn't the truth that Your problem is broken promises, and it's deeper than the last couple of years. It's Brexit too. It's migration. It's migration. The NHS was meant to get better. We were all remember 350 million quid on the side of a bus, don't we? It's levelling up. It's a catalogue of broken promises. You must surely see why so many voters think it's time for you and the Conservatives to get your P45.
Well, I can absolutely... Of course I can understand people's frustrations. It's been a very difficult few years. We've been through 2 once-in-a-century shocks, which have had an enormous impact on everyone, on public services, on people's standard of living. Of course it has. When energy bills double, when inflation goes up to 11%, when a pandemic shuts down our economy, with all the impact on everyone's livelihoods, of course that's taken its toll. But this election now is about the future, and I do believe that we've turned a corner. And when I appreciate that people want to see positive change. And my only point would be that you don't get any change unless you've got a plan and you're prepared to do bold things. And that's what our manifesto sets out, a way to do that.
Let me just ask you, we'll come to you in a moment. I've got running out of time. Now, I just want to ask you one more thing. You were once popular. You were dishy Rishi. Do you remember? Can you tell our audience something about you that might make them like you a bit more again?
Well, actually, funnily enough, people seem to think I have a very kind of healthy lifestyle and I go to the gym and this is an obsession about my fasting. But I actually have an appalling diet because I eat an enormous amount of sugar and I'm very unhealthy in that regard, which I was talking to someone today about. They were completely shocked. I'm not sure that's not really something that someone needs to like me more or less, but that's something I was talking to someone today and they're genuinely surprised about the amount of Haribos, Twixes and everything else that I get through, particularly during a campaign. So contrary to popular belief, I don't have that healthier lifestyle or diet.
OK, a sugar fiend. Prime Minister, thank you so much for the interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, you've just heard there what the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had to say to our political editor, Beth Rigby. He told her many things. He said he was deeply sad to have caused hurt and upset when he left those D-Day commemorations early. Rishi Sunak also admitting tonight he hasn't made as much progress in cutting NHS waiting lists as he would have liked, suggesting strike action was to blame. And Mr Sunak conceded immigration to the UK is too high. And he understands why people are frustrated and angry. Well, now it's our audience turn to put the Prime Minister under the spotlight. And just to remind you, we're joined tonight by voters from across the political spectrum, independently chosen from here in Grimsby and right around the UK. Beth, it's over to you.
Thank you, SJ. Well, our first question from the audience comes from Ian. He's a retired teacher from Grimsby. There he is.
Good evening.
Hi, Ian.
Following Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget with its unfunded tax cuts, mortgages have become much less affordable, particularly for young people, such as my daughter. Why has your government spoilt their hopes and dreams? And how do we know you won't do it again?
Well, Ian, how old's your daughter?
She's 19.
And did you say she has a mortgage or she's looking to buy a home?
She was kind of hoping to buy a home until you put the mortgage rates up and you failed to meet your housing targets, and she's struggling to find a property that she can afford.
Yeah. Well, look, I want everyone to be able to own their own home. It's a really magical thing when you can, whether your daughter and everyone else. And the best way for us to do that is to get interest rates down again in the first instance, and that's why I made a priority to bring inflation down, because that's how we will enable the Bank of England to then start cutting interest rates. And as you can see, inflation is down from 11% back to normal, so hopefully we're on the right path then, and you will see that reflected in mortgage rates. But actually in our manifesto, there were a couple of things that will help your daughter, and hopefully you can tell her about them, and hopefully she's watching. One of them was stamp duty. So what I will do if we're re-elected is to abolish stamp duty for first-time buyers, like your daughter, buying homes up to £425,000. And
to be honest, Mr Sunak, I don't think she was thinking of buying a house that expensive.
No, it's up up to, for everyone, up to that amount. So that's a tax cut that's worth thousands of pounds of deposit that she otherwise wouldn't need to save for. And alongside that, we will also reintroduce a new version of Help to Buy, which allows her to buy a home with just a 5% deposit, because when I talk to people like your daughter, what they say to me is, actually, I will be able to probably just about afford the mortgage, but what's tricky is the time it takes to save up for a deposit. And we saw with the previous version of Help to Buy that it makes a big difference, because it saves a young couple or a young person years in having to save up for that deposit, because the Help to Buy loan steps in to plug the gap and saves people an enormous amount of money. So Help to Buy, together with a stamp duty abolition for first-time buyers, essentially, will help young people like your daughter, because I believe in a society where everyone can own their home, and if we're elected, we can cut taxes and build the home, so that's possible.
OK. Our next question is from Hamza, who works in the NHS. He's from Hersham. Hamza? There you go.
Good evening, Prime Minister. As a proud member of staff in the NHS and a patient, I've seen firsthand the chronic effects of underfunding and staff shortages, especially post-Brexit. Recruitment and retention is very difficult, and staff are continuously burnt out with waiting lists seeming to never end. And I've personally experienced being left on a stretcher for 8 hours in my local A&E department while in pain, just in the corridor. Going forward, how can you convince me that you'll restore our NHS to an institution that we can be proud of?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Hamza, first of all, for what you do and all your colleagues do in our incredible NHS, and I'm very sorry to hear about your experience. I think the first thing to say to you is I come from an NHS family. So, like you, like my parents, they worked in the NHS, and my dad was a GP, my mum was a pharmacist, and they dedicated their lives to helping people. And I was surrounded by that growing up. And actually what they instilled in me was an importance of how we can continue to help people. And I worked for my mum doing exactly that. So that's the first thing you need to know about me when it comes to the NHS. And that's why we've put record funding into it. But your point is the right one. What we have not done for not just years, but for decades, is train enough staff and then be reliant on having to bring people here from abroad. And in the NHS's 75-year history, it has never, ever had a long-term workforce plan. But for the first time, it does, because I thought that was the right thing to prioritise. And we announced it together. It was the NHS's plan that the government has fully backed. And I said to them, look, this is the right thing to do, because we need to train more doctors, nurses, dentists, physiotherapists, everything today, so that in years to come, the NHS will have the staff that it needs to ease some of the pressures, reduce reliance on staff from overseas, and make sure it's a fantastic career for everybody. And look, candidly, with the best will in the world, you know, I won't be here in the 14 years that it takes to train a consultant that we're paying for today. But I thought it was the right thing to do to strengthen our NHS for the long term, because people like you are brilliant. We want to make sure we train as many of you as possible, so you have lots of colleagues, ease the burden and get everyone the care that they need.
But just coming back on that, if you look post-Brexit, when we lost a huge majority of the staff that we had in our NHS, there wasn't a plan to fill those gaps and led to chronic shortages. Then we had the COVID pandemic, which this country was not prepared for, and I worked through and saw the amount of people that were affected, burnt out. I had a close family member who was going through the COVID pandemic and now is living with long COVID and had to wait weeks to even get on a ventilator. And then the economy, under your leadership as Chancellor and under Boris Johnson, who you supported, we tried to get back as soon as possible, not thinking that this was still an ongoing pandemic. Boris was too late bringing in the lockdown rules. You were really quick to open up lockdown again, which led to another spike in COVID cases. And this is what has led to continuous, this is what has led to this long term of trying to rebuild the NHS. Now, you say that you're coming from an NHS background and you have this instilled value of caring for the NHS. How are we going to do that if you try and undermine it at every level?
With greatest respect, that's not what we're doing. We're investing record sums into it. We're training more doctors and nurses than we ever have, and there are more doctors and nurses in the NHS today than it's also had. But we also need to do things differently. And it's whether it's things, and you'll know this from, and what's your particular specialty?
So I'm a physiologist in cardiology.
And you're a cardiology, right? So you'll know that we're doing things like elective surgical hubs, virtual wards, community diagnostic centres, of which there's one right here in Grimsby. And those are all new innovations that you and your colleagues have pioneered, that we have supported, that will actually mean that people can get the care they need quicker and secure the NHS for the long term.
We're going to take from the hospitals to the hubs to staff them, because there's shortages of the staff already. We're short of radiographers, all the trades, all the different specialities throughout the hospitals. We're short of staff. So building another building that's going to move it from the hospital is not going to cure the problem. It's just going to make it worse.
Thank you. I'll just go on to that. Okay. So, ma'am, we are recruiting and training more doctors, nurses than we ever have in our history, and there are more today, and I know we need more, and that's why we've made those investments. But
I'm going to wrap this.
But I will just pick
I've got so many questions.
But I think that's very important. Where I just very respectfully disagree with you, actually based on the clinical advice that we have from all our leading medics, is that we can improve care for people by doing things outside of hospital. And the Community Diagnostic Centre, one of which is here, is a great example of that, where you can get your checks and tests and scans quicker. Another example of that is pharmacies. Right? Because I think that you should be able to go and see your pharmacist to get treatment rather than your GP for common ailments. That's a change that we've brought in that already millions of people are benefiting from. And again, it's just an example of doing things differently to get people the care that they need.
Look at all these questions. I'm under pressure here. Christina from London, please.
Hi. There are people who grow up in communities like mine that are concerned about policing. Statistics show that systemic racism, sexism and misogyny are still prevalent in UK policing. Do you accept that these issues are in fact systemic? And what are your plans to improve relations and build trust between the police and our communities?
Well, misogyny, racism, discrimination has absolutely no place in our society, but particularly when it comes to the police, because they're people that we look to protect us and trust, and all the things that we've seen and read about over the past year or two have been really appalling and shocked us to our core, because we thought, hang on, the people that we put our trust in, they're a small minority, and we shouldn't tar the entire police force with the actions of a small minority, but a small minority of people who were behaving in a way that was completely reprehensible.
So you don't accept
and it's right that those people are held to account. Now, the Met in particular, there are issues, and actually we instituted a report which was done, which now the new Met Police Commissioner is working through to improve relations and make sure the Met is focused on policing in the right way. But I also want to make sure that our communities are safe. Safe for you, safe for everyone else, safe for my two girls to walk around in, which is why we're putting more police officers on the street, giving them the appropriate powers they need, and toughening up sentencing, particularly for the most violent crimes, and focusing especially on violence against women and girls. So that's what we're doing on policing. Police numbers today are at a record high, and if we're elected, then we'll put 8,000 more police officers on the street, warranted officers, which one extra one for every neighbourhood, because I think, to that lady's point, that neighbourhood policing is really important, and having police officers who know their communities well, and I was out with some not that long ago, where they can build those relations is really important.
What's also important is accepting that it is a systemic issue. First, you accept that, and then you can plan to change the things so that these things don't happen again. It's not just bad apples if it happens over and over again.
And in the Met in particular, as I said, there are a range of issues. We instituted a report to look into them, and the new Met Police Commissioner is there and is reforming the Met so that it can actually learn from the mistakes of the past and let's make sure that these things don't happen again.
Right, thank you. Our next question comes from Amy from Leeds. There she is, please, Amy.
Hi, Prime Minister.
Hi.
My name's Amy. I'm a former Conservative Party chair and a lifelong True Blue. But in this election, I find myself an undecided voter. Actions taken by this government actually make me feel ashamed. You left David Cameron at the D-Day celebrations to represent our country. To me, this feels like a deliberate action, as you know that your ratings in the polls are so low. How do you plan to rebuild the public trust in you, or is it already irreparable?
Well, Amy, thank you. Well, thank you for all your previous volunteering and service to the party. And when it comes to D-Day, as I said, I absolutely did not mean to cause any offence or hurt. That was not my intention. I made a mistake and I unreservedly apologise for it, and all I can do is ask for people's forgiveness. And when it comes to trust in my commitment to our veterans community and the pride that I have in what they've done for our country, what I would say to people is you can look at the things that we've done. There is a veterans minister sitting around the cabinet table for the first time with more funding than we've ever had, focused on supporting veterans with their mental health, physical health, employment opportunities, housing, because it's something I care deeply about. But more generally at this election, as you said, you're undecided. This election is about the future and the future that you want for our country. And I believe that the manifesto that we put out yesterday contains a very clear plan, a bold set of actions that will deliver a more secure future for you and everybody. And that starts with cutting everyone's taxes, because I believe people should keep more of their hard-earned money. It means bringing migration down. It means a more sensible approach to net zero that prioritises our energy security and your family bills. And it means protecting pensioners, because I think if you've worked hard all your life, you deserve dignity in retirement. So those are some of the things I talked about yesterday. That's a choice at this election. It's an important moment for our country, but given the opportunity, I can deliver a secure future for you and everyone else.
Amy? And I would, yeah, thank you so much. I would usually agree. I just think that, and I'll be very honest here, that picture of the Queen, our late Queen, who was left to bury her husband on her own, during COVID, following guidance that we all followed, and knowing what was happening in Downing Street, and you were part of that, and you had a fixed penalty notice, and you've apologised, and I understand all of that. That's where the trust broke down, and I just think we have long memories in this country as a public, and you really will have to go some. And I appreciate the apology tonight, thank you very much, but that you have to realise that there is a long way to go to really rebuild that.
Yeah, no, those rules were difficult for everyone to follow, and the government should absolutely have gone above and beyond in following them. And I deeply regret what happened. I apologise for it at the time, and it was an extraordinarily difficult time for our country, and I know that, and I know that people will remember that. And all I can say is, look, trust takes time to rebuild through actions, and whether it was what we did during COVID to support the NHS, roll out the vaccine, support people's jobs, what I've done over the past 18 months to deliver on restoring economic stability and start making progress on bringing migration down, that's how you earn trust, through your actions, making progress on the things that matter to people. And that's what I plan to talk to people about through the rest of this campaign. And yesterday's manifesto sets out a direction of travel for the future.
Should Amy and other Conservatives vote for reform?
No. Very simply, no.
Why not?
And the reason for that, and I'm glad you asked the question, right? The reason for that is a vote for reform ultimately is a vote to put Keir Starmer into number 10. So if you're someone who cares about cutting taxes, if you're someone who cares about cutting taxes, protecting pensions, a sensible approach to net zero that prioritises security in your bills, or indeed bringing migration down, both illegal migration and stopping the boats, I'm the person that is going to deliver that for you, not Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer doesn't have a plan to tackle illegal migration. Right? Keir Starmer is not going to cut your taxes. Keir Starmer is going to reverse all the reforms I made to getting us to net zero in a way that saves you money, and that's going to put up everyone's bills. So that's the choice, right? And Keir Starmer is certainly not matching the triple lock plus, which is going to protect pensioners, and instead there's going to be a retirement tax for every pensioner in our country. So that's a choice for you and for everyone else thinking about it on the issues that you care about, who is more likely to deliver for you, and a vote for anyone who's not a Conservative is just a vote to put Keir Starmer in number 10.
PM, I've got another question. It's from William. Where is he? He's a student from Grimsby. There he is.
Hi there. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Take it away.
Given the recent policy announcements regarding national service for younger people, and you alluded to the quadruple lock on state pensions, as well as your record and the Conservatives' record in government, why would a young person today believe the Conservative Party has their best interests at heart?
So, William, actually on national service, I have 2 young girls. I'm incredibly excited for them to do it, because I think it'll be transformative for our country. I really do, because it'll provide skills and opportunities for young people that will set them up for the rest of their lives, foster a culture of service in our society, bring people closer together and contribute to our long-term resilience and security. And actually, everywhere I've been, people have been really positively talking to me about it, and actually parents, more than anyone else, excited about what it will do for their kids. But more broadly, so that's just one thing, right? A couple of days after that, we announced another big policy where I want to provide opportunities for young people, you and everyone else, which is why we're going to curb the investment into rip-off degrees, which let young people down, and take that money and use it to fund 100,000 high-quality apprenticeships, which actually can provide an enormous opportunity for people. And the answer to the question, I think Ian's first question, wasn't it, Ian? There you are, Ian's daughter, with buying a house. Because when I talk to young people, that's the thing, they want a great job, they want to be able to buy their own home. And what we announced yesterday in the manifesto, a couple of days ago, is going to make a big difference, because it's going to mean that it's much easier for young people to get on the housing ladder and buy their first home. So whether it's an amazing apprenticeship, whether it's national service, whether it's buying your own home, actually what you're seeing are bold ideas that will make a big difference and spread opportunity around.
Just say no. Are you going to criminalise them? Are you going to set a generation of young people up with criminal records for just saying no?
No, of course not. Of course not. No, of course that's not the thing. And actually what we said we would do is set up a royal commission, which we haven't had in this country for actually about 25 years, and they're set up independently to look at big things like this. And there are lots of models from across Europe that you can look at to make sure that we have an appropriate mix of incentives and sanctions, and that's how other countries do it. And actually, if you talk to other countries around Europe, and when you talk to them, actually the percentage of young people that recommend it and love it is extremely high, and they think it's an incredibly fulfilling apprenticeship.
I'd really like to get a final question. William, very quickly, but I've got 2 minutes.
The national service policy, it might be popular amongst parents, as you said. The quadruple lock on pensions might be popular amongst parents and older generations, but it's not popular amongst younger people. Why are you moving your party so far away from younger voters when it's the key demographic that will be our future?
OK, I'm going to go to the last question.
Can I answer the question?
Well, I can't get the... Yeah, go on.
William, look, I think national service is transformational and positive for young people. I think cutting stamp duty and Help to Buy to get young people their first home is really positive for young people. I think creating more high-quality apprenticeships is really good for young people. And when young people getting into work, getting a tax cut so they can keep more of their hard-earned money is really positive for young people. And actually, I don't view society as an us versus them, because every young person also has a grandparent, and I think they want their grandparents to be looked after when they retire, and that's why I think it's right to do the triple lock plus 2, and I think you agree with that as well.
Happy with that? You happy with that, William?
Yeah, but I think we can do both at the same time.
And that's the point, we are doing both. We're cutting taxes for young people buying their first home, creating new apprenticeships, and the triple lock plus to protect pensioners who have worked hard all their lives and are grandparents to those young people. We are doing those things, and as I said when I was sitting there, we can cut taxes for people at every stage of their life. That's the type of country I want to build.
OK. I'm afraid we are out of time. Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us here in Grimsby tonight. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Well, you've heard tonight from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the Labour leader, Keir Starmer. Thank you to both men for being here. There are now just 22 days to go until polling day. We really hope our programme this evening has helped you make up your mind.
And thank you to our live audience here in Grimsby as well. I'm going to be getting their views in just a few minutes' time. But first, Sophie Ridge will have all the political reaction to what we've witnessed this evening from the spin room. This has been the battle for number 10.
Well, there you go. If you wanted accountability, that is what you got. In my view, the most forensic hour and a half of the election campaign so far. And I want to take you from the debate room to the spin room, because this is where the analysis starts. We're going to try and cut through the spin. We're going to try and get the reaction. And critically, we're going to try and find out whether or not what just happened in that room that I've just left is enough to change the direction of the election campaign. We'll be talking to these guys in a minute, spinning for their bosses, no doubt. But first, I just want to bring you a few of the highlights from our leaders' event here on Sky News.
Specific taxes, but the Tories say you will go further. They're right, aren't they? You will.
Well, the first thing I'd say is the Tories are in no position to lecture anyone about tax rises. We've got the highest tax burden.
You were looking at wealth taxes. You are looking at wealth taxes. It's OK to say it.
We're not looking at wealth taxes. When I grew up, my dad was a tool maker. He worked in a factory. It's true. My mum was a nurse, and actually we couldn't make ends meet. We need a growth plan for Grimsby, which your fingerprints are on. If you leave your country in a worse state than when you came into government, you should be booted out.
OK. Promise number 3, reducing national debt. It's gone up since you made the pledge, hasn't it? It has.
Yes, yeah. But it was always meant to come down over time, and that was always the time. I can appreciate people's frustrations. Of course, we haven't got everything right. I don't think any government does.
If you were so confident about getting these flights off in July, that this was the apex, really, of stopping the boats, why did you call an election before voters could actually see it was happening?
Because an election is an important moment for our country, and my priority when I got this job was to restore economic stability.
Building another building that's going to move it from the hospital is not going to cure the problem. It's just going to make it worse.
Thank you. I just answer that. So, ma'am, we are recruiting and training more doctors, nurses than we ever have in our history.
Right, there you go, the battle for number 10. Let's dive in. We're here in the spin room where, I'll be honest, the atmosphere is absolutely electric. And I'm very glad to say we are now joined by the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, for the Conservatives. And for Labour, we've got the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. Thanks for both being here in Grimsby, analysing what we just heard. Let's get the spin out of the way first, shall we, right? Because we know how it all works. We're in the spin room. Let's do the spin first. James, what did you make of what we just saw?
I was genuinely shocked by Keir Starmer's first non-answer. When Beth was pushing him, saying, did he really believe it when he said that Jeremy Corbyn should be Prime Minister? And he squirmed and squirmed and squirmed. And basically his answer was that he was being dishonest with the British people, either then or now, we're not sure which. But it didn't matter because he didn't really think that Jeremy was going to win. I think if you're going to try and put yourself forward as someone of integrity, that answer is, I think, going to be really, really damaging.
What,
and
so
he refused
you're saying
to
that he
answer
doesn't have
questions.
integrity, is that what you're saying?
Well, he basically said that either he didn't ever believe Corbyn should have been Prime Minister, in which case he was lying then, or he did believe it, in which case he's lying now. But the bottom line is, you can't have it both ways. And I think if you're going to try and put yourself forward as Prime Minister, have the opening exchange in a debate like this, where basically he could not be honest about his relationship with Corbyn. I thought it was really damaging. I then refused to answer any questions.
So you picked the moment there that kind of stood out for you. It's about Keir Starmer, which I think is quite interesting in itself. You know, you think
well, it was the first thing that happened in the whole evening, was him refusing to be honest about his views on Jeremy Corbyn.
Wes, what stood out for you?
I just thought, in terms of the audience reaction, people are crying out for change. They can see that only Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are able to deliver that change, because they can judge the Conservatives on their record. And when they see Labour's manifesto tomorrow, and we've been trailing some of it in advance, people will see that every promise we make is a promise we can keep and the country can afford. We've made difficult choices. That means that we can put forward a credible plan, and we are ready to go. And you could see, you know, I think, in sort of terms of Keir's energy, we're not taking the outcome of the next election for granted. We're working hard for every vote, but we are desperate to offer this country the change it is crying out for.
So that's what you two taken out of it. I just want to put one thing to both of you, if I may. Firstly, to you. For me, I'll be honest, Rishi Sunak looks slightly broken tonight. Do you think that's fair? Is it taking a toll on him?
No, look, he was willing to answer difficult questions, which I think is in stark contrast to Keir Starmer. We had loads and loads and loads of words, incredibly long responses, but absolutely no answers. And when pushed on details of tax policy for example, he did loads of Barnum statements, these kind of very wordy, very vague, hard to disagree with statements. When actually pushed about would he rule out tax rises, he refused to do so because he knows what we know, and what he's trying to hide from the British people is under a Labour government, taxes would go up. As sure as night follows day, taxes would go up. And when asked to deny it, he failed to do so.
My question to you, Wes, is I felt the hardest question for Keir Starmer in many ways came from the audience member who said he's a bit like a robot. And then he answered it a little bit like a robot as well, I have to say, don't you think?
I didn't think when Keir was asked about what he fears, or whether he's afraid or anything he's worried about if he becomes Prime Minister, and he talks about his family, that didn't come across as remotely robotic. When he talked about the service that he's given to our country before entering politics and why he's in politics, I don't think that was a robotic answer at all. I thought his answers to questions were thoughtful. I think it speaks to the fact we've got a serious plan. And I do think it is a bit rich, given we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years, for the Conservatives to point the finger at the Labour Party and say, as you know, sure as night follows day, taxes are going to rise. Rishi Sunak would not level with us on the fact that the tax burden will continue to rise under the Conservatives, and he didn't level on the fact that so many of his plans are unfunded. That would mean more borrowing, that means interest rates up, and that means families on average paying £4,800 on their mortgages. We've seen this movie before with Liz Truss. What Rishi Sunak offers is Liz Truss on steroids, because he's desperate and he's throwing all sorts of unfunded policies into his manifesto.
Go on, you can talk to him if you like.
So we've identified exactly where the money is going to come from. We're going to bring back to pre-pandemic levels. We are going to reduce towards pre-pandemic levels the amount of money that we are spending as a nation in welfare. All we're doing is taking some of the recent increase and reversing that. That will free up about 12 billion a year.
That's already baked into government spending plans.
And 6 billion in terms of receiving taxes that we are due as a nation. But Labour have made a series of commitments that we have got Treasury officials to
not this again.
To crunch the numbers.
Tory special advisors. Come on, you can't keep on peddling this.
It's on the Gov website.
Tory special advisor. I know, which is a disgrace. But it doesn't alter the fact that it's Tory special advisors.
I didn't interrupt you, Wes.
No, but come on, you've got to keep it credible.
I didn't interrupt you.
You've got to keep it credible.
Can I?
So these numbers are crunched by Treasury officials. The letter from the Perm Secretary, the senior civil servant, says so. The figures are on the government website. We totaled them up, and but they're figures produced by Treasury civil servants.
What question would you ask each other?
Do you deny the maths?
Yes, because you put incorrect assumptions into the machine, and the machine spat out totally bogus figures.
No. So the point is,
and that's basically
Keir
what you've now
Starmer
had the Cabinet Secretary
the opportunity
and the Permanent Secretary of the Treasury having to point out the fact that Conservative special advisors have given the assumptions to civil servants to work up. This is embarrassing, James. It's embarrassing. It's almost as embarrassing as your 14 years of record of failure, which you can't stand on, which is why you're desperate to run against Jeremy Corbyn. We've kicked him out. He's not a Labour candidate.
Okay, come on.
You're not able to confront the Labour Party in front of you, which is changed, which is credible and offering the change the country needs.
What do you say?
Keir Starmer was given the opportunity to deny that he's going to put taxes up over and over and over again, and he failed to deny that taxes were going to go up over and over and over again. And the figures that we crunched were cautious figures. So we say it is going to be at least £2,094, at least. Probably more, because we erred on the side of caution when we analysed those figures. And Keir Starmer had a chance tonight, and he was presented with a chance over and over again to deny that he'd put taxes up, and he squirmed and squirmed and squirmed again.
We've ruled out an increase in income tax, VAT,
what about all the rest?
And national insurance.
What about all the
because
rest?
We wanted to send a strong message to working people. We wouldn't put those taxes up. When you see our manifesto tomorrow, nothing in there requires any additional taxes.
I can't get them to stop talking. You can see.
Keir Starmer,
you can see.
We've been on the campaign trail. We've seen each other for ages.
Keir Starmer,
I might pull up a chair. I'm going to get tired at this rate.
So he says removing a tax break is not the same as increasing taxes. Of course it is. Of course it is. And he said that on air.
We're out of time. Thank you both very much indeed. You get a sense of just how much it matters to both of them, don't you? Thank you both very much. Home Secretary, Shadow Health Secretary, great to have you here in Grimsby. Shake your hands at the end. It really does show, though, doesn't it, I think, just how much the stakes really matter to both sides here. You get that in the row over tax. You get that in the frustrations over their ability to get their messages out. Because for both men, what happened tonight matters so much. For Keir Starmer, he's got his eyes on the prize. Did you notice the little slip when he talked about his first year in government? They don't want to jeopardise that. They don't want to make any mistakes. For Rishi Sunak, of course, he needs a moment. He needs a moment in this campaign to change the narrative and to really, I guess, change public opinion, because the polling so far has been pretty devastating for the Conservatives. It hasn't been closing the polls. If anything, they've been moving in the wrong direction. Around 20 points the blue water between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party so far. Will that change tonight? We can find out, because our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, joins us now. And Sam, really, look, we just heard from the party candidates, some of the shadow front bench team and the front bench team. But it's the audience that matters, and more than that, it's the people outside of the room. It's the general public. That's the view that matters. What have you got for us?
That's right. Look, it was an incredible moment this evening. You had Keir Starmer making clear that he can change his mind in politics and stonewalling bluntly on key issues like tax. But the night was really all about that interview with Rishi Sunak. He looked crestfallen for large parts of it. Blow after blow on questions about his record, questions about whether he would even be Prime Minister in a year. And Sophie, right now, the verdict is in. We have had the responses to a Sky News YouGov poll about tonight's event. And unlike last week in Manchester, I can reveal there is a clear winner. 36% said that Rishi Sunak won, but 64%, so a 2-to-1 margin, said that Sir Keir Starmer was best overall in tonight's event. 1,864 people gave their verdict, 2-to-1. So different from last week when it was 51-49 in favour of Rishi Sunak. But at times almost defeated figure as Prime Minister sat on that stage, and the audience and the country out there, watching in large numbers, I suspect, listened and have responded. Look, I think whether it was the way the audience interacted with Rishi Sunak, which was at several moments slightly mocking and condescending and laughing at him, whether it was the way that he was trying to defend his record, but reach for things that I think you and I would find quite questionable. The tax burden's going up in the next Parliament under the Tory manifesto. He tried to dodge that point. You had questions about junior doctors. He appeared to be blaming the junior doctors at one point. That drew fire from the audience. There were questions about debt. He suggested that he'd never meant to imply that debt would fall in the period before the general election, instead saying it was all a calculation for 5 years hence. I think people watching the Prime Minister's performance would have been slightly baffled that the man who came in promising to be a new broom, promising to be transparent, was really having to reach for versions of the truth at points that were quite at odds with people's lived experience. Beth Rigby, who did a brilliant job and left no stone unturned, summed it up towards the end, saying, your problem is broken promises, Brexit levelling up. Do you think the public will give you, the Tories, the P45? And Rishi Sunak just came back with the line that he's used so often, I understand their frustrations. They're looked in that seat today, somebody who was not enjoying an election campaign, who knows that this was a moment where he needed to flip the public's view of him in his favour. But it appears from the Sky News YouGov poll that by a margin of 2-to-1, Keir Starmer has come out on top, 64 to 36. That will hurt for the Conservatives.
It really will, Sam. Thank you very much for bringing us that snap polling and also the snap analysis that you've just had as well. Sam Coates there, a Deputy Political Editor. Well, there you go. They needed a moment. They needed something to change the narrative of this election campaign. And that snap YouGov poll is not what Number 10 will want to hear, because by a margin of 2-to-1, YouGov asking people to leave their political preferences aside. Who won the debate? Well, they chose Keir Starmer. What about the audience in the room? Let's gauge, shall we, what the audience made of the two leaders, shall we? We can go to Sarah Jane Mear, who's standing by with some of those who joined us here in Grimsby for tonight's event. Sarah Jane, they really didn't hold back, did they?
No, they didn't, Sophie, and there's still a real buzz in this room. What an atmosphere it was in front of this live audience with the two leaders here on stage giving their pitch to the people in this room and the people watching at home as to why they should form the next government. Well, let's ask the audience what they thought, should we? When we came into the battle for number 10 tonight, our political editor, Beth Rigby, clearly said, let's see if we can make your choice at the polls in July that little bit clearer. So let's ask, shall we? Is it a little bit clearer for people tonight? Hands up if anyone, after what they watched this evening here on this stage, changed their mind. Let's have a show of hands. A small number. I think I can count about 3. I'm going to go up here and ask, shall I? Because we wanted to get a bit more information tonight, make your choice a little bit clearer. So why did you change your mind after what you saw on the stage tonight?
Well, so I came into this thinking that I preferred Starmer. Sunak was a smoother debater, but at the end of it, I would vote for neither. Because I didn't like either of the responses we got tonight, and so I'd be looking at other parties for my vote, I think. OK, so clearer, and you changed your mind. I'll come back here, this gentleman here.
I've always been a lifelong Conservative supporter, and I voted them for every election, but I have to say Rishi Sunak just looked like a defeated man with unoriginal ideas. And that was, for me, quite difficult to watch and hear as a Conservative Party voter, so I think I'll find it challenging to vote for them at the next election. OK, and then there was just one other person here, this gentleman. You put your hand up. How have you changed your mind tonight?
I voted Conservative in the last election. I voted for Brexit. I thought tonight Rishi Sunak looked unprepared. If he acts like that against questions from us in the audience, I don't see why he behaves, you know, in the international stage. OK. All right, well, some clear answers from our live audience tonight. I want to talk to a few of the people that got the opportunity to put their questions to the leaders. One of them was Cayman, who's just over here. I'm going to pass the microphone down to you, if I may, Cayman, because it's a bit rude to reach across 3 people. And Cayman, you asked Sir Keir Starmer about his personality. You were impressed with him when he led the CPS. But as the leader of the Labour Party, you accused him of acting a bit like a robot. What do you think you got when you asked that question?
He got a bit shook. He stuttered and he quite clearly he took it on board, but what we expect of these leaders is not going to get it right first time, and it's a case of if you just admit what's happened and say that you maybe didn't get it right first time and then move on. But the thing with Keir Starmer is he's clearly changed, and the way that he words his questions, the way that he answers the questions, he doesn't answer the question, and he doesn't get my vote for that. Do you feel you got any of that tonight? Do you feel like he warmed up and he answered Beth's questions, your questions? It was clear when he was speaking to Beth that he was trying to dodge the questions, and he never really answered any of the questions properly. Again, did he do that in his previous jobs? Probably not. But yeah, he doesn't get my vote, I'm afraid. OK, right, I'll take the microphone back if I can. Thank you very much, Cayman. I'm going to come to Jackie. We had a heckler tonight. Actually, not a heckler. Healthy contribution from Jackie when it came to the NHS. I'm going to do the job of passing down the microphone. Thank you, gentlemen, for helping me out there. Jackie, we're talking about the NHS and Rishi Sunak, if he is to go get the keys to number 10 and be re-elected, his plans for the NHS. And you pulled him up on his plans for, you know, building these centres and hubs, and you quite rightly pointed out who are you going to put in them?
Yeah, there is a massive shortage of staff across not just our hospital, but many hospitals. It's different for other areas, especially in the bigger cities, because it works for there. But when you're at the end of the line, you don't even have a train that goes direct to London or anything like that. People don't want to come here. People don't want to work here because it's not the big cities. We're not massive teaching hospitals. We do teach, but it's not the same. And therefore, with these hubs that are being built here and in Scunthorpe as well, the staff, who is going to staff them?
Do you think you got any clear answers from either leader tonight about how they're going to fix a broken NHS, whether it's A&E, waiting lists, dentistry? Do you feel any clearer about plans?
Not at all. Both of them are claiming that they know exactly what the NHS is like, but actually I don't think either of them have got a real reality of what the hard-working staff, the junior doctors that are going on strike, the nurses, they don't have a clue. My whole family works for the NHS, and it's been a hard slog for especially the nurses in my family. They don't understand it.
I tell you what, when both candidates mentioned the fact that their families worked in the NHS currently or previously, that didn't go down well in this room because, as you said, so many people in here have the same kind of connection to the NHS. Jackie, do you mind if I just take the microphone back? No, you're a live wire with a mic around, so I'll just take it back. She says she's going to get in trouble when she gets home. You tell them that you're OK, Jackie, that's fine. Will, you had an interesting question for the Prime Minister, and it was about the Conservatives' plans to basically appeal to the older voters, whether it's the triple lock pension, etc. But you said, hang on a second, what about us young voters? We're the future.
Yeah, exactly. I think the recent sort of triple lock plus policy announcement and then national service is playing to this audience that I think maybe he's trying to win over the key demographic of Conservative support, which is sort of the over 55, over 60s. But they're only there for the short term. Sort of, it's us younger generation who he needs to attract. I don't mean that in a horrible way, but
well, you're going to be around a lot longer, aren't you? Yeah.
But it's also not just the 18 to 24, as someone said about their daughter and housing and different things. These are all issues that young people care about. Maybe it's because we don't go out and vote and participate a lot, as older generations do. So, yeah.
It's not us and them, is it? Everyone's interlinked through the generations in families.
Yeah.
Well, Will, thank you for contributing tonight. Thank you very much. Well, there you go, a little flavour of what our live audience here in Grimsby Town Hall made of the event here, the battle for number 10. Both leaders giving their chance to talk to the people here and talk to everyone at home as well, answering the questions that you want answered. I will be here for the rest of the hour talking to people in the audience. I know some of them are itching to get out of here. It's a long time to sit and be patient and listen. So thank you all very much indeed. Sophie, I'll hand back to you for now.
Sarah Jane, thank you so much. And of course, thank you so much to the audience here in Grimsby who came up with all those fascinating subjects. They certainly gave them a real going over, didn't they? We're in the spin room. You can see the spin happening as we speak. The politicians behind us giving interviews. You've got Sam Coates over there doing his piece to camera. I hope we're not interrupting him. But I just want to take you this way because the room is full of politicians. It's also full of journalists. And I'm really interested to see what their snap verdict was. We've had the Snap YouGov poll. We've had the verdict of our audience. Let's go back to our journalists, shall we, and try and find out what Kitty, Albert and Claire made of the goings-on today. Kitty, you work for the Eye, don't you? Before the debate, you said you were on gaff watch. You wanted to know, I think, was it if Keir Starmer was going to make a gaff, like punching a spaniel or something? Well, what did you make of the... what did you make of what happened?
I thought, actually, the interaction between the leaders and the audience was the most interesting bit. Not to denigrate what Beth did. Beth did an amazing job. She's world class. But actually, it was the kind of what the audience, when they laughed, when Keir Starmer said he was the son of a toolmaker, there was a great big cheer in the press room because we've been hearing that so often during the campaign. When the sort of jibes at Rishi Sunak when he made comments about immigration and so forth and taxes and people not trusting him. But actually, in general, I think the thing I took most from it was that there's such a mistrust of the political class as a whole that actually that's what needs rebuilding. It does matter who wins in 3 weeks' time, but the whole class has got to do better.
Yeah, it does feel like that, doesn't it? And that's about the communication, but it's also about the action as well, the words, isn't it? Alva, great to have you back again. Rishi Sunak needed a breakthrough moment, didn't he? Do you think he got that?
No, I mean, I don't think it was easy for Keir Starmer. He had his own ropey moments when he was called robotic and he gave a robotic answer. He was kind of on the ropes on his record supporting Jeremy Corbyn. But I think it was really, really bad for Rishi Sunak, honestly. I mean, he was laughed at, he was booed. And I actually think, as Kitty was saying, it was those sort of very real moments from the audience, especially that very measured former local Tory party chair who just sort of said why she feels ashamed to be a Tory these days. I think that was really, really difficult for Sunak. A complete reflection of what the polls are telling us. But I think him having to face that was really, really tough.
Yeah, facing the public in that way is always so difficult. I mean, fair play, I have to say, for both men for putting themselves through it. You know, it can't necessarily be easy. Claire works for the Mail. Claire, what did you make of the debate? Do you agree with Albert that actually it was really bad for the Prime Minister?
Yes, I think he came off worse. I think it's been a Snap YouGov poll saying that Keir Starmer did better. Rishi Sunak just felt quite low energy tonight. He's obviously had a really tough week with D-Day, but he just, the audience really weren't on side and you could sort of feel their contempt. And, you know, it was a brutal grilling from Beth. And then the audience, I mean, it's a total drive-by, wasn't it? And I think the mocking laughter was probably one of the worst things for the PM, because if you're facing an audience, you're trying to win people over and people are laughing at you,
no one wants that.
No.
Not great at all. Thanks all very much indeed for your snap verdict. So there we've got to go. We've had the snap verdict of the audience, the snap YouGov poll, and I have to say the snap verdict from our journalist wasn't great for the Prime Minister either. Claire pointing out there that if you're being laughed at by the audience, then that is not what you want to end a leaders' event with. Challenging, of course, for both men, from the forensic grilling that we had from Beth Rigby, where she really put them both through their paces, to, of course, those tricky questions from the audience. There was one person's name who came up as well, I have to say. He wasn't in the room tonight, he was in Millbank. He's told us already this evening he's had FOMO because he's not here. Well, don't worry, Ed Conway, because you made it into the debate yourself. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister said about our very own Ed Conway.
Our economics editor, Ed Conway, calculates that the tax burden on the country will be higher than it is now under a future Conservative government, even taking into account your proposed tax cuts. That's right, isn't it?
No, I haven't seen that analysis, and I'm not sure that is right. What we announced yesterday, and all,
is Ed wrong?
I haven't seen his analysis, so I can't comment on it because I haven't seen it. But what I can tell you is what our manifesto announced is, you know, tax cuts for people at every stage of their life, for people in work, for people who are setting up small businesses and self-employed, for those young people who want to buy their first home, for pensioners and for families.
Well, Ed Conway, let's go now, shall we, to our data and forensics editor. Ed, you heard there from the Prime Minister saying that you hadn't seen your analysis about the tax burden under the Conservative government. Do you want to run it through it for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit awkward, actually. And also, I'm a little bit surprised because I know that, you know, within Conservative Party headquarters, they certainly have been looking at these numbers. But let's just, for a refresher, should we refresh the Prime Minister's memory, or rather give him a sense of what we're talking about here? Because it's quite important. It's actually quite important. And this is, what we're talking about here is the total tax burden for the UK. This is not just national insurance, it's not just income tax, it's everything. It's everything that we pay. And the higher this line is, the higher the tax burden is, OK? It's national account taxes as a percentage of GDP. Goes all the way back to 1945. Look, there's the war. It's very high then. It kind of comes down, bounces around a lot. It goes up quite a bit during the COVID and the energy price shock for understandable reasons. It was going to go up to there, OK? So that's the current path, according to the latest OBR, Office Budget Responsibility figures. You can get the spreadsheet on their website, Rishi Sunak. But if you insert the latest plans that the Conservatives have from their manifesto, again, from the scorecard in your manifesto, Prime Minister, this is what comes out. The line still goes up. Yes, it goes up less quickly than it did before, but it is still going up. So the tax burden is still rising into the next Parliament under the Conservative Party. Might go down a teeny bit at the end, but we don't really know about that because we don't have the figures yet. But it ends up higher. It ends up higher. And just to make that clear, let's take that line and we'll draw a line all the way back here. And there you can see it. It's the highest since the 1940s. OK, so that is the calculation we're talking about. And by the way, in case you're worried, is this just a dodgy Sky News thing? Well, actually, the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, did their sums after we did, and they came up with basically the same answer. So, yes, the tax burden will go up under the Conservative plans, even after all of those national insurance cuts are taken into account. It's largely because people are paying more because they're being dragged into higher tax bands thanks to the fact that you've frozen the allowances. Let's just kind of talk about a couple of other things. And stop me, Sophie, if I go on, because there's quite a lot to talk about here. There were quite a few moments, weren't there, where a lot of us were like, ooh, hang on, does that really add up? One of the things that was kind of interesting, this is just more like a definitional thing, OK? The Prime Minister said a couple of things. Inflation is back to normal. And actually, that is true. When you look at the annual increase in inflation, it is now at 2.3%. What I'm showing you here, though, OK, is the level of prices across the UK. And look at the level. The level's going up and up and up. When we talk about inflation, OK, that's the annual increase. And inflation in this case, the last year, is the difference between that point there, perhaps we can zoom in this area, that point and that point. And that difference is 2.3%. So it feels, if you look at the kind of data, that is normal. However, for most people, it's not really about that. It's actually the difference between that and that. When the cost of living crisis actually started, that was pretty kind of normal. Then things started to really accelerate. And if you look at the difference between that, the last 3 years, that's 20%. So it's worth just saying, you know, that's not really a correction for the Prime Minister, but it is a kind of big difference. Another thing that he said was kind of, which was interesting, let's say, was that the government is bringing down migration. And I mean, when you look at the overall picture of migration, this is net migration across the UK. You can see when Brexit rules came into place, you can see this enormous increase in migration. But here's the thing, OK? He said it's coming down. And that is true according to the statistics. But here's the thing. They get revised quite a lot, OK? So last year, the rise looked like that. Then it got revised, and it looked like that. Note how it looked like it was coming down. Then it got revised again, and it looks like that. So we've got to be a little bit careful about assuming that migration really is coming down, or maybe when new figures come in, it just gets revised all over again. So there are quite a few things one could pick apart. And there's more also from what Keir Starmer was talking about as well. But I'm kind of conscious I don't want to eat too much into your time. Perhaps we can come back and talk about Keir Starmer and some of the things he came up with in a moment.
Let's definitely do that, because it is fascinating to have all these claims picked over and to get the numbers and the actual empirical evidence for what is going on. Ed Conway, thank you very much indeed. We'll have more from Ed, fact-checking some of Keir Starmer's pledges soon. So, how would tonight have gone down with the two camps as they went back to their green rooms tonight? We're joined by Lee Kane, who worked as Boris Johnson's Director of Communications when he was in Downing Street. And we're also joined by Tom Baldwin, who is the former Director of Communications and Strategy at the Labour Party. Great to have you both with us. Tom, to you first. I mean, Keir Starmer was really put through his paces, whether it was Jeremy Corbyn, you know, why has he changed his view on that? Why has he junked some of his pledges? Is he a man who can be trusted? And of course, by the audience member who described him as too robotic. How do you think he came out?
I think it's a really testing examination from Beth Rigby. It's a really combative interview. And he was asked a lot about what he would do and what he couldn't do. And I think he's trying to sort of set some limits on expectations of what next Labour government might do, while also saying, look, you know, we can do some things. Sunak, by contrast, just looked so depressed. He just was apologising all the time for what he hadn't done or what he had done in some cases. I mean, that contrast in energy between the two is one of the things.
I mean, Sunak's got a record, so it is harder, to be fair. He's got a record to be judged on.
Yeah, but I mean, Keir Starmer's asked a lot about his record, you know, and particularly in the last Parliament when he was, working in a shadow cabinet and Jeremy Corbyn was leader. I mean, the truth is, and one of the things I've shown in my book, is that 18 months before that general election, he had a leadership campaign team in place. Now, some people might say that's a bit treacherous against Corbyn, but he was preparing to take over even then.
OK. Lee, I'm interested to get your view on this. Tom was there saying that Rishi Sunak looked a bit depressed. There's a bit of truth in that. He looked quite broken. I mean, you've worked with him for years, or you did previously work with him for years. What did you make about his demeanour?
Broken's quite a strong term, I would say, but I think you could contrast the two. Keir Starmer looks like a man who feels very comfortable, very happy with the way the campaign's going. He looked quite relaxed on stage. I think he was quite uncomfortable with the Corbyn question. He didn't really have a good answer for that. He was uncomfortable on tax. I think where Rishi's struggling is defending that record. I think fundamentally, when you set out your 5 pledges, many of them aren't being met. I think particularly immigration, NHS waiting lists, people are really feeling that real-world experience. You could see that with the audience. And again, he struggled around answering those. And the mood reflects the polls. I think you feel when you're on a winning campaign, you feel when you're not. And I think there was a bit of reflection on that.
He needed a moment, didn't he? He needed something to change the polling, something dramatic. I mean, did that happen?
I think we said that at the start, didn't we? Keir's going in there not to drop any lead, not to make a huge mistake, and I think he'll be happy with how things went. Rishi really needed both him to have a moment and Keir to have a huge mistake, and neither really, I think, did.
Do you agree with that, then?
Yeah, I mean, look, we were both in the room with the journalists watching the debate, and then afterwards, Labour came in straight away. And we were there for about half an hour. Tories didn't show up. They weren't there. Now, maybe they've gone in since, but, I mean, there's something almost like they're sort of leaving the pitch now.
I mean, we had James Cleverly here, got to be said. He came out, he did defend his farm, we can see him behind us. So they're doing a bit, right? Yeah, but they just didn't come into the room with the journalists. There's like something, if you've got something to say, you'll be in that room. That's where you brief off the record. They didn't have anything to do. Thanks both for your analysis. Always fascinating to get the insider perspective, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Well, a little earlier on here on Sky News, we heard from the Green Party as they launched their manifesto. Earlier, I spoke to Reform UK and also Plaid Cymru as well. So, time now to hear from the Liberal Democrats, because we're joined now, I'm pleased to say, by their deputy leader, that's Daisy Cooper. Daisy, first of all, I'm sure you've been listening to our leaders event here on Sky News. Who do you think was the winner?
Well, I think the audience's reaction spoke volumes about this evening, didn't it? And when they were listening to Rishi Sunak's answers, you could see it in their faces and in their questions. Their reaction was one of either exasperation or just pure anger. And I think we can see that people are just so exasperated and angry about the state of the country, about the state of the NHS, about the state of our education system. And there's just this overwhelming sense from the public that just everything is broken.
There's been quite a lot of praise for Keir Starmer in the spin room here, and also, of course, that Snap YouGov poll showing that by a margin of 2-1, people thought he won the interview in the audience Q&A today. Do you think he did a good job?
Well, I think, to be honest, like many people, I'm sort of waiting to see what the meat on the bones is going to be tomorrow in terms of their manifesto. But I think really what you could see from the audience is that they are crying out for a change, and most of their anger and frustration was really directed towards the Prime Minister.
It was interesting, wasn't it, to hear the exchange that Keir Starmer had with Beth Rigby on tax. It felt to me like that was one of the most uncomfortable moments of the interview, when she was saying, yeah, you've ruled out these tax rises, but how about things like council tax? How about things like capital gains tax? And she was going through a number of other taxes as well, fuel duty, for example. Do you think there's an argument that actually Labour should be more open, that taxes might need to go up if we are to maintain spending on public services?
I think every political party needs to be open and honest about the taxes that they are going to rise or lower or leave the same. What I can say for our part as Liberal Democrats is that we have said repeatedly that we won't be raising taxes on struggling families during a cost of living crisis, because that would be the wrong thing to do. But we launched our manifesto earlier this week, and we set out where we would be raising taxes, and we would be raising them on the really big banks that had a tax cut under the Conservatives. We'd be raising taxes on the big oil and gas companies. We'd be raising taxes on the big water companies. We'd be reforming capital gains tax to close a loophole that's exploited by the 0.1% richest people. So I think every political party needs to be open and honest about where the money's going to come from, so we can help struggling families and put public services back on their feet.
Of course, we know that there is a pretty big gap in the polls at the minute. Labour's ahead of the Conservatives. Rishi Sunak needed a game-changing moment. Do you think that this election result is all over? Do we know the result of the election already?
I don't think you ever know the result of the election until 10 p.m. on polling day. Every single day something can happen, and I think what you will know and what we saw from the audience tonight is that there are millions of people still who haven't made up their minds. For our part, certainly, I think we're getting the impression from speaking to people on the doorstep that they feel like they've been taken for granted for a very, very long time, and certainly as Liberal Democrats, we're not going to take their votes for granted, and so we'll be fighting every single day, day in, day out, until 10 p.m. on polling day to make sure that we can persuade people to put their trust and their votes in us, because we have a plan to fix our NHS, to tackle the cost of living crisis and to protect our local environment.
So you say that we don't know the outcome of the election, which could mean that Labour get a majority that's much smaller than people are predicting, or even no majority at all. Would you be prepared to go into a coalition with the Labour Party? You say that parties need to be straight. What's your straight answer?
Straight answer is I will not be thinking about anything beyond 10 p.m. on polling day. Seriously, I think there are millions of people who haven't made up their minds. People are feeling. Well, it is a straight answer, because honestly, I've been in politics since 2008, and I've seen time and time again when political parties of all stripes start talking about and thinking about what's going to happen after an election, and when they do that, they end up losing votes in the meantime. We are absolutely determined not to do that. Our job in this election as Liberal Democrats is to unseat as many Conservative MPs as possible. We're the key challengers to the Conservatives in around 80 seats around the country, and we'll keep campaigning until 10 p.m. on polling day to unseat as many of them as possible.
Thank you very much indeed. Daisy Cooper there, the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, speaking to us tonight. Right, well, let's hear now from the woman of the hour, tonight's inquisitor, our political editor, Beth Rigby. I feel like I want to give you a hug.
Oh, I think I need one, Sophie, thank you.
How are you doing?
And we're both in pink again.
I can't believe it.
This is our luck, isn't it?
What was your sense? Because we were watching it all here and enthralled with the spin room, but what was your sense in the room of what happened?
Well, there are a few things. Like, I think from Rishi Sunak, we got more emotion about the D-Day commemoration. He talked about how he felt bad. I think being in front of an audience made a real difference to both men, because they were kind of used to being interviewed by me, but they weren't really talking to me. They were talking to the audience as well. I thought we got a bit more clarity about Labour and tax. I don't know about you, Sophie, but I came away thinking, yeah, they're going to put up some taxes, and actually he didn't deny that. He was clear about taxes for working people. In terms of the dynamics in the room and with the audience, I would say that it was hard going for Rishi Sunak. It's the first big public appearance since the D-Day commemorations, and I think actually the strongest question from the audience around that was that lady who had been a Conservative backer, and she said, I just don't know what to do anymore. For Starmer, I think there was but I should say I also thought he came and made the argument, and he's keeping fighting and he's keeping going. For Starmer, I thought the most revealing moment for me, actually, Sophie, was he was doing the Q&A, and he said, when I'm in government.
Yeah,
and I went, what?
That. You picked that up well.
And I did. No, because you would have done the same, because you would have gone, whoa.
Yeah,
because every time you say, do you think you're going to win? He always says, if I'm
lucky enough,
I'm humble enough to learn everything. And I just went, whoa, so you are going to win. You think you are going to win. And he just went, whoa. Yeah. So I think there's a change in dynamic here, where Labour really are feeling more confident now, and for Starmer to do that, I felt it was one of those tiny things that probably other people wouldn't notice, but as Starmer watchers as we both were, that really sort of stood out for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's that confidence, isn't it? It's that confidence. Let me know. How did you prep for it? What did you do? What was the half an hour before? Were you like having cups of tea? Were you listening to Beyonce? What were you doing?
The way you prep for it, and Kay Burley always told me this. I hope she doesn't mind me spilling her advice. Sorry, Kay. She always said, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And this is my television motto, and it's Kay's. I just prepared a lot, so that by the time you get to do it, you're kind of ready to go.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you go and take a breather. Thank you very much, Beth Rigby, speaking to us there. Well, we've been talking to Beth, we've been talking to people in the spin room, and the politicians, of course. But really, some of the people that matter more than any of those people is the audience here in Grimsby. How did the two leaders go down with them? We can cross now to Sarah Jane Lee, who is with a very, what's the word? Vibrant audience in Grimsby. They didn't hold back.
They certainly didn't. 3 turned into 4. They wanted to stick around, Sophie, to tell you exactly what they thought of the two leaders who were on this stage tonight. Of course, it's all about what people watching at home made of what unfolded over the course of those 90 minutes. They were represented here by a live audience from Grimsby and across the UK, and I'm pleased to say 4 of them are with me. Thank you so much. Sharon, I'll start with you. I've got Sharon, Holly, Kerry and Humza here. Sharon, you opened the show with your question to Keir Starmer, and you're from here in Grimsby. And it was a big opening question. It was about disadvantaged communities like those here in Grimsby and what Labour are going to do to help you. What did you think of his answer?
I think that he gave me some of the answer, but I would have probably liked a bit more and more clarity. Yeah. I was particularly impressed with the fact that he's recognising that he does need to bring it to a local level, and that central government shouldn't be making all the decisions for local towns and cities. So using local councils to inform and advise how money should be spent in our own areas is really important. So I did like that, and I totally agree that we do need that business progress as well, that we need to grow the economy through businesses and supporting especially small businesses, something we really need to do here in Grimsby, and giving our children those opportunities.
So you got some of the answers, and that's the constraint, isn't it, of a TV format. We only get 90 minutes to talk to both leaders, and there's so much to get through. Holly, so sorry you didn't get to ask your question tonight. And it was about a really important one as well, childcare.
Yeah.
But Sir Keir Starmer did touch on childcare when he talked about the potential tax on private schools, putting VAT on private schools. He said it's not a tax add-on, it's actually just getting rid of a tax break.
Yeah, so I feel like the Labour Party in the last couple of days have actually made their plans quite clear of how they're going to actually staff and create these childcare places. I particularly wanted to ask my question to Rishi Sunak because I don't think it's something that the Tory party have done so far. It's all well and good saying here's a few funded hours that you can all have. But if you're not funding it, you have no workforce strategy behind it, then, you know, all you're doing is creating a massive demand without the supply. So frustrating, I didn't get to ask him what he's going to do about that loss of childcare places and how they're going to create those places. And it is disappointing that there is no mention of childcare in their manifesto whatsoever.
Well, look, we've got 22 days left to go to polling day. I'm sure at some point we will get your question to the Prime Minister. Hamza, you took on the big subject of the NHS, which, you know, got the audience sort of really buzzing because, you know, there was a point where both leaders mentioned their family, their personal connection to the NHS. There was a lot of eye rolling, there was a lot of guffaws. We've heard it all before because everyone here has a particular affinity to the NHS, no more so than you and your family. What is it you asked and what is it you heard?
So, yeah, I agree. I mean, what I asked was mainly in response to how we can sort of return to an NHS that we can be proud of. I feel over the last 14 years, the NHS has massively been degraded, completely underfunded. There's not been the attention that we really need. It was clear during the COVID pandemic that we weren't ready at all as a country for a pandemic. Who knows if we're ready for the next one? I mean, I've been in the NHS for about 5 years now. I worked throughout COVID, and you can see very, very clearly the lack of funding and the effects that it has on NHS.
Well, look, you told a really personal story as well about spending 8 hours on a stretcher in a corridor, and I know you've got an operation tomorrow, so good luck for that.
Thank you.
And finally, Kerry, you asked about dentistry to Sir Keir Starmer. You've been waiting over a year to see a dentist. Did he give you a clear plan of if he were to get the keys to number 10, what he'd do to help?
With most respect to Sir Keir, it's OK for a politician to stand on a stage and give out numbers of how many new dentists are going to be trained, how much money is going to be invested. I would like to have heard where this money is going to be coming from. All we're hearing about is tax cuts. To me, if you do tax cuts, where's this money going to come from? I'm quite happy to have my tax increase so that we can go back to how we was with the NHS.
But you need to know that it's going directly to the areas that need it the most. Kerry, thank you so much. We've run out of time, as we keep talking about. There's so much to get through. There's never enough time. Thank you for being in our audience tonight. I'm going to hand back to Sophie in the spin room.
Sarah Jane, thank you very much indeed. Well, tonight we've spoken to the Greens, Plaid Cymru, Reform UK and the Lib Dems. Next up, it is the SNP, and I'm very pleased to say that we're joined now by the Deputy First Minister, Kate Forbes. What did you make of the leaders' event tonight? Who do you think came out on top?
Sorry. Well, good evening. And I think looking at the debate this evening, with only a passing mention of Scotland, voters are very angry with the Conservatives and they're very uninspired with Labour. And of course, in Scotland, there is an alternative to vote for the SNP. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions that we have, not least about our public finances. We know that in this election, voters really want to see change. They want to get rid of the Conservatives because they've given us austerity, Brexit and the cost of living crisis. And the question is whether Labour will double down on Tory austerity or do something different. And Sir Keir Starmer seemed pretty clear tonight that he was doubling down on Tory austerity.
I'm interested in your take on the challenge of the public finances, if you like, after the next election. It's an area I know you got experience in yourself in Scotland. Keir Starmer was really pressed by Beth Rigby when it came to taxes. Do you think a Labour government would put up taxes, and should they be a bit more honest about what that might look like?
Well, I think they definitely should be honest. You know, they are engaged in a conspiracy of silence when it comes to the realities of our public finances. And that's not my words, that's the Institute for Fiscal Studies. We know that from the last Tory budget, the IFS were predicting about £18 billion worth of cuts to frontline public services. And what Labour have outlined is that where they are increasing revenue, it's all going on the new projects, which means there's still £18 billion worth of cuts baked in to our public services. Now, that's hugely concerning to voters in Scotland. In Scotland, we've tried to mitigate against that austerity with some progressive changes to taxation. But Labour seem to be completely ignorant and disinterested in how we reverse 14 years of austerity to our public finances. And to quote the Labour Health Secretary, when it comes to devolved public services, all roads lead back to Westminster. So if this really is a change election, unfortunately, I don't think voters going down the Labour route are going to see much in the way of change. And we need strong Scottish voices, SNP MPs, to hold Labour's feet to the fire and make sure they don't forget about Scottish voters.
OK, Kate Forbes, thank you very much indeed. Always good to have you on the programme. I'm sorry we're very short for time today, but interesting to get your perspective. Well, we're talking to politicians, we're talking to the members of the audience, and now I think the thing that's really interesting is the polling that we've done. How has this debate, how has this leaders' event changed public opinion, if at all? We can speak now to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, and also we've got YouGov's Patrick English standing by, who's been looking at some of that snap polling for us. Sam, the headline polling was quite something, wasn't it?
I think today was quite possibly a major campaign moment. Look, we saw the images of Rishi Sunak looking somewhat crestfallen. We heard the audience, but the decisiveness of the viewing public, 64% said that Keir Starmer was the winner, 36% said that it was Rishi Sunak, a 2-to-1 margin, incredibly painful. Look, Patrick's about to give us a lot of detail about the specifics underlining those headline figures, but this is not what they wanted to see. The election moved further into Keir Starmer's court because of what happened tonight in Grimsby.
Yes, really the opposite of what they wanted when it comes to public opinion. Patrick, I can see you there holding a piece of paper. What numbers can you give us?
Yes, I think the headline number is very striking, and then underneath that is another very striking number in that 1/3 of the debate watchers who voted Conservative in 2019 said that Starmer won.
And these are people who voted Conservative at the last election.
That's exactly it. These are people who voted Conservative, who backed Boris Johnson, who were part of that coalition that delivered a seat for every day of the year for Boris Johnson back in 2019. They told us tonight that it was Starmer who performed best.
Do you see any way of the Conservative Party coming back at this stage in the campaign?
It's getting very, very late indeed, and I think some of the rest of the results speak to all the problems that they face. Keir Starmer came off as more trustworthy, according to the debate-watching public, more likeable, more in touch with ordinary people, more prime ministerial, which is a big shift, I think, a very important thing to know. As well, he won on the issues of the economy, things that matter to young people, and the NHS. The only place where there was, let's say, a crumb, a silver lining for Rishi Sunak was on tax, and that of course has been something that the Conservatives have focused on a lot over the past week, and there the debate watching public were very split on who performs best.
A quick thought from you, Sam, as we're about to hand over to Gillian.
We are halfway through this campaign now, but most of the major moments have happened, perhaps no bigger than the one tonight. Can Rishi Sunak do anything to save this campaign that he calls?
Thank you so much for being with us. Really interesting to get those numbers as well. Patrick English, Sam Coates, thank you. Well, we knew it could be a big moment in the campaign, but if that polling is anything to go by, then it is not the move that Number 10 wanted. What a forensic evening we've had here on Sky News. It's been an extraordinarily forensic day. Those questions from Beth and, of course, the stellar audience here in Grimsby. Stay with us. News at 10 with Gillian Joseph is coming next. She is live here in Grimsby with a full roundup of what's happened here tonight and all of the day's other news. But that is it from us for now. That's it from me. That
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from outside the Grimsby Town Hall, the home of the battle for number 10. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak have pushed on the cost of living, the NHS, education and immigration.
The numbers are too high. Of course they're too high. What I can tell you is what I've done since I've had this job, and that's last year. Yes, and the numbers are too high. I'm not making any bones about that. The numbers are too high, Beth.
Well, nothing in our manifesto requires tax rises over and above those that we have specifically set out.
No tax rises in the next Parliament?
No tax rises needed in the plans in our manifesto.
In the plans?
No tax rises.
After questions from Sky News and from the audience, tax was one of the main issues tonight. We'll cut through what they said in our campaign check. We're in Grimsby, one of the key target towns of this general election campaign for both parties. On the campaign trail, the Green Party launches its manifesto, but is warned against its £70 billion tax hike on the wealthy. Also tonight on Sky News at 10, Sky News speaks to the family of an Israeli hostage rescued from Gaza. Jurors in the new Lucy Letby trial have been told her previous convictions should be taken into account as an important piece of evidence. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening and welcome to this very special Sky News at 10, live from Grimsby. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer have been trying to convince voters that they should get your vote in the upcoming general election. They've been questioned by audience members and by Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby, about tax, the NHS and immigration. Sir Keir Starmer insisted he would not be raising taxes to fix public finances. He also promised to sit down and negotiate with the NHS. Rishi Sunak acknowledged that people were frustrated over immigration numbers since Brexit, but did give a date for the first flight to Rwanda. Coming up, we'll be hearing from the audience. We'll be testing out some of the claims made by the leaders, and we'll be bringing you the details of that poll to find out who came out on top. But first, Sky's deputy political editor, Sam Coates, reports now on the battle for number 10.
200 miles from Downing Street, the battle for number 10 now playing out in Grimsby. The two men vying for the keys to that door know they need to win voters like these. This place voted Tory last time, but now Labour wants it back. Keir Starmer first up to be interviewed by Sky's political editor Beth Rigby. He wants to convince this audience and the country he can be trusted. But it's a long journey since his last election campaign.
You said, I do think Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. Jeremy Corbyn, did you mean that?
I was certain that we would lose the 2019 election.
Did you not mean it when you said it?
I was certain that we would lose.
Now will you actually say, yes, I thought that, or I didn't think that at the time? Just be honest.
I honestly didn't think that we had a chance of winning that election.
So you said it anyway.
Tax, a constant issue in this campaign. Do Labour's plans add up?
But the Tories say you will go further. They're right, aren't they? You will.
Well, the first thing I'd say is the Tories are in no position to lecture anyone about tax rises. We've got the highest tax burden.
No tax rises in the next Parliament?
No tax rises needed in the plans in our manifesto.
In the plans?
No tax rises for working people. That's income tax, national insurance,
so you're
and VAT.
not ruling out. I just decode that for you guys, because when a politician says no plans, it does mean I might.
Well, Beth,
I've done this a bit. It does.
No plans for a wealth tax, but he is a top earner himself.
Would you personally be happy to pay more tax?
Yes, of course.
A hint of domestic life and personal troubles.
Was Vic, your wife, not keen for you to do this?
No, she wasn't at all. She
What
thought
does she think
it'd be
about
far
the
better to
prospect of
continue
you-
being a lawyer on a reasonable salary and not have all of the, challenges that you get as a politician. But I was clear in my mind. I wanted to come into politics because I wanted to serve my country.
The audience asking questions too, and some not holding back.
Over the last year, I feel like you've formed into more of a politician than the person that I would have voted for to run the country. You seem more like a political robot. How are you going to convince others like me to vote for you?
Well, the most... look, all I can say... I went to run the Crown Prosecution Service. You referenced that. I was the Chief Prosecutor for 5 years. Apologies.
Cayman, did he convince you, yes or no?
I hope you don't answer the questions... how you answer the questions, and I hope you never answered them the way that you did when you were a solicitor, because you don't seem to answer the question.
OK. I'm gonna...
Some frustration at the lack of detail, but this man not giving much away. Rishi Sunak needs a big win in this room and beyond. But can he escape the chaotic record of his party?
In this Parliament, we've had 3 Prime Ministers, 5 Chancellors, 5 Home Secretaries, 6 Health Secretaries. How do we know that if you won the general election, you'd still be Prime Minister in a year's time?
Look, I can appreciate people's frustrations. Of course, we haven't got everything right. I don't think any government does, and I know it's been very difficult for many people. But what I can do is work as hard as I can to deliver the stability that I said I would, and I've had this job for 18 months.
The PM tested like rarely before on his promises. One, to get waiting lists down.
No, just cutting NHS waiting lists, that's pledge 4. When you made the promise, the list was at 7.21 million. It's now at 7.54 million cases. It's gone up.
Yes, it has. Yes, I'm very good. We've not made as much progress on cutting waiting lists as I would have liked.
The point...
Rishi Sunak facing boos, losing some in the crowd and, at times, looking crestfallen. Immigration, the next challenge for him to overcome.
Why did you call an election before voters could actually see it was happening? Why?
Because an election is an important moment for our country, and my priority when I got this job was to restore economic stability. And we talked about bringing inflation down and getting the economy growing, and then being in a position, as we are now, to cut people's taxes.
Legal immigration, another example of failure. And again, the audience hostile.
What was the total net migration figure in the last 3 years running up to the 2016 referendum when we had freedom of movement? Do you know it?
I don't have it offhand.
It was 836,000 people. And I'm sure many people in this room would have voted for Brexit. 70% of people in Grimsby voted for Brexit. How do you think they feel about that when they hear that net migration into this country has more than doubled in the last 3 years from before we left the European Union?
Yeah, I'm sure people... It's too high. I've been very clear that it's too high. And I'm sure people feel frustrated and angry about it.
Trying to show he gets it. But after 14 years in power, the audience seemed low on patience.
You say that you're coming from an NHS background and you have this instilled value of caring for the NHS. How are we going to do that if you try and undermine it at every level?
With greatest respect, that's not what we're doing. We're investing record sums into it. We're training more doctors and nurses than we ever have, and there are more doctors and nurses in the NHS today than it's also had.
Because there's shortages of the staff already. We're short of radiographers, all the trades, all the different specialities throughout the hospitals. We're short of staff. So building another building that's going to move it from the hospital is not going to cure the problem. It's just going to make it worse.
Perfect. It was a bruising experience for the Prime Minister. His campaign needed a win, but it didn't come here.
An exclusive Snap poll suggests a decisive verdict. 64% said that Keir Starmer won, just 36% said Rishi Sunak, not the result the Prime Minister needed.
Halfway through this campaign, tonight a major moment. Both sides will try to claim their man won, but the reactions in the room and from the viewing public tell a different story. Can Rishi Sunak turn it around from here? Sam Coates, Sky News, Grimsby.
So, who won? YouGov, as you've heard, have already done their polling, and here it is. The question was, leaving aside your own party preference, who do you think performed best overall in tonight's televised leaders event? 36% Rishi Sunak, 64% Sir Keir Starmer. Well, as we saw tonight, we had a live studio audience made up of people who live locally and those who travelled for the event. Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes is a key battleground for the Conservatives and for Labour. It could create a swing that can impact the outcome of the election. Sky's national correspondent Tom Parmenter has spent the last few weeks here finding out what matters most to the people. And today, he's been gauging the audience response before and after we heard from Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer.
Who would walk into Grimsby Town Hall and really test the leaders? Members of the public looking for straight answers.
I really care about Grimsby, and I'm tired of the inequalities that we're experiencing. And I'm tired about the fact that we seem to have been forgotten, and that needs to change.
Things aren't going well in so many different areas. The NHS, care, housing, mortgages, cost of living, it's all impacting real people, my family included.
People were drawn from across the nation.
I'm undecided, and I feel like a lot of the country is undecided. So I just think these are opportunities they really need to grasp.
You used to be very loyal to the Conservative Party, but
absolutely,
for you that's gone?
Yeah, gone completely. I would really like to come out of the debate tonight knowing who I'm going to vote for, but I have come with an open mind to try and see if these two gentlemen can convince me who should be the next leader of the country.
Everyone wanted their say, but inside, the audience had the chance to come face to face with the two men vying to become Prime Minister. As they left, we caught up with them.
And one thing I was impressed is when Keir Starmer did say that he would like to, we need to bring it back to local level. We need to bring it to help local councils and that make those decisions rather than central government dictating all the time what we should be doing.
So who won the battle here?
I think the people, and not to sound, political, but they asked the questions that they wanted to ask, and the answers that these two gave will decide what people want to vote for.
You were part of a very unforgiving audience there.
We were. It was hard for both of them, and I appreciate what they did. And I also think the format was so much better in having them not shouting over the top of each other. We did actually get to the humanity of them a little bit and hear a little bit more. And perhaps you read between the lines of the things they don't answer.
Many were left wanting more.
For you, the battle for number 10
It's still on.
It's still on?
Still on for me, yeah, absolutely.
This was a tough crowd. For some, it has made a difference. Just 3 weeks before the nation decides. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Grimsby.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, joins me now. And Sam, you've been here throughout the course of the day. Just how important was tonight for both men?
Look, I think, Gillian, we had a really critical campaign moment this evening. Look, first we saw from Keir Starmer, and we did learn things about him. We saw his determination not to give very much more away, but in the context of somebody who has changed his mind repeatedly as a politician. So I think the interview with my colleague Beth Rigby drew out the question, are we really sure what a Keir Starmer premiership would look like? But for me, the transformative moment of tonight was the performance of the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, whether it was the reaction of those in the room, the reaction of those viewers at home that decisively decided that he was not the winner by a 2-1 margin, or even just the look on his face. You'll have seen now the pictures of Rishi Sunak looking almost haunted, perhaps crestfallen. He really struggled on questions of his own priorities and his own delivery and his own promises. And I think it was very instructive to watch the way that he handled that. And you could feel the audience uncomfortable with the answers and wanting to push back about the way that he was doing it. I felt that Rishi Sunak knew that too, and at points it was a painful watch. We are exactly halfway through this general election campaign right now, Gillian, and I'm really starting to wonder if after that, in that room behind us, in that town hall, Rishi Sunak can do anything to pull back this election campaign.
Would you go as far as to say that he seemed to be a broken man?
I think I would encourage every viewer to watch the slightly haunted figure that we saw on that very big stage today and draw their own conclusions. I think the evidence was there across 45 minutes, and the verdict of our viewers was clear. It feels really hard to see him instilling the confidence that you would need to be to continue in the job as Prime Minister after what we witnessed tonight.
OK, Sam, thanks very much for the moment, but do stay right here next to me. We're going to stay with Stan when we come back, but I want to get more of our analysis now. Ed Conway is at the screen tonight. And Ed, there was a focus on tax for both party leaders, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a big focus on tax. It's interesting, there wasn't like one single number that dominated this like it did in the first time they debated that £2,000 figure. But tax was this issue that kept coming up actually for both of the candidates that you saw today. One interesting thing, the Prime Minister saying that he wasn't aware of this analysis, which is strange because we've been showing it for the last 24 hours. I know it's well thought of. Or at least it's been considered in Conservative Party headquarters. This is showing you the tax burden in the UK, OK? It goes all the way back to the 1940s. The higher this line is, the more we are taxed. And it's every tax. You know, it's national insurance, it's VAT, it's the whole lot. It goes up a lot after the energy price shock and COVID. It's forecast to go higher in the next few years. We just had the Conservative manifesto. And the key issue, the key question really is whether those tax cuts talked about in the manifesto are going to bring that line so it starts going down. But actually, when you look at them, they're not. It's still going up, albeit less sharply than it is before, albeit not quite as steeply. But nonetheless, if you draw a line between where it gets to and back in history, this is the highest level it's going to be since the 1940s. So even after all of those manifesto pledges, it's worth saying a few other things that the Prime Minister talked about as well that's worth just kind of discussing. First of all, he talked about migration, saying that they were bringing down migration, this government. Well, if you look at what's happened to migration, I think for a lot of people it won't quite feel like that. When those Brexit rules, post-Brexit rules came into force, there was a very big increase in migration. And that's last year's estimate. It's been upgraded since then and upgraded again. So while it's certainly true it's coming down, it keeps getting revised ever higher. So there's a bit of caution about that. And there was a little bit, I don't know if I go so far as saying a porky pie, but it's one of those statistical things that you've got to be a bit cautious about. When the Prime Minister was talking about a record number of police officers, yeah, it's true in terms of the total number of police officers. Look, this bar here, the higher the bars are, the more police officers, that bar is definitely the highest on record, or at least going back to 2010. But adjust it by the numbers of people in the population. Look at this. We're going to do that adjustment. So that's per 1,000 head of the population. And now look at this line. OK, we'll go back, 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 back. Oh, actually, it was higher pre-austerity. OK, so there were a few things to pick out there. But even when it came to Keir Starmer as well, some question marks in particular about tax and about spending. A big question I think that Beth talked about is which taxes would you rise if you need to raise spending? And essentially, Keir Starmer saying he didn't want to raise the rates of income tax, national insurance, VAT. Obviously, there's question marks about whether you're going to be raising the total amount you're getting from it. But if you knock those out, where is Labour actually going to raise those taxes? Obviously, we're going to get their manifesto tomorrow, so we might hear more about it. But that's why people are wondering about things like capital gains tax. They're wondering about fuel duties because there's only so many things you can actually raise. But you do potentially need to raise them because there is a big, some people call it conspiracy of silence, there's a big hole in the spending numbers in the future. While it looks like there's big increases in spending, well, relatively big increases in spending, and while it looks like protected parts of government have big increases in the coming years, the unprotected parts of government, this is based on the numbers that we already have in the Office of Budget Responsibility, are very, very poor. A big fall of 3.5% following 20% real terms cuts before. So there is still some extra spending needed to be found if you're going to bring spending back to levels that is going to improve public services. So still some big questions for Keir Starmer. Obviously, we get the manifesto from the Labour Party and we'll bring you the full analysis of that as well.
Ed, thank you. He didn't go as far as porky pies, but almost. Sam, still with me. Sam, what did we get to know about the vision for both potential governments, both sides?
I think what we learn is that when it comes to that manifesto detail for both sides, we're in the middle of manifesto week, public are paying really, really close attention. And the way that Rishi Sunak handled it and the audience reaction was really instructive. There were boos when he blamed the junior doctors for waiting lists. There was disbelief when Beth Rigby read out the immigration figures all these years after Brexit, when migration was meant to be taken back, we were meant to take back control of immigration. And there was disbelief again when Rishi Sunak tried to sort of reframe his promises on debt to say he would meet them in 5 years' time. I can tell you, I checked the original speech, that was never the promise. All of that went down very badly with the audience, and it's quite clear that the precision promises of politicians are really important. So let's look at Keir Starmer, because at the moment, it's his to lose still, and that debate's done nothing to change that. And he was really, really cautious, not just in what he said, but what he didn't say. And it's quite clear from that interview with Beth Rigby that there is huge scope, actually, for Labour, for instance, to put up taxes, as Ed was saying. There was a great line from my colleague, you know, when you say you have no plans, that means you might well. And I think whether it's fuel duty, whether it's capital gains tax, it feels like, whether it's council tax re-evaluation, what we saw today was Keir Starmer refusing to rule those out. If there is the kind of black hole that Ed was just talking about, I think we learnt tonight those options, raising those taxes, very much on the table.
OK, Sam, thank you so much for your analysis. Thank you. Well, elsewhere on the campaign trail, the Green Party has launched its manifesto today and promised a £70 billion tax hike on the rich to fund the NHS. But the Institute for Fiscal Studies warns the party's tax plans would disincentivise work and investment and could increase borrowing by around £80 billion a year. Sky's political correspondent Gurpreet Narwan reports now on the Greens' pitch to the voters.
A break from the past, with a fairer tax system to fund public services. That's the pitch from the Greens.
We would overhaul our tax system to make it fairer. At the heart of this would be a tax on the very richest, the top 1% of people. Greens have the courage to say that we would change the tax system to make it fairer and make this investment possible.
These are significant numbers, £170 billion a year, and not just for the richest.
The changes to national insurance mean that people earning over £50,000 a year will be paying more tax. That's 1 in 5 taxpayers. How do you justify that in a cost of living crisis?
The cost of that for somebody on £55,000 a year would be an extra £5 a week. People earning under £50,000 would not be affected. So we are asking modestly more, but we think it's, for people on middle incomes, a modest amount that's affordable and that is going to enable us to invest.
But the party's been dogged by rows beyond tax and spend, with multiple candidates investigated after sharing offensive posts online since October the 7th.
There is no place for anti-Semitism in our society or in any political party. Where cases were brought to the party's attention, those were thoroughly investigated and appropriate actions taken by that independent process. There have been some cases that have, I'm concerned, have conflated anti-Semitism with criticism of actions of the Israeli government.
Brighton Pavilion is the only seat the Greens currently hold. They have a near 20,000 majority. But voters here aren't all convinced.
They're useless. As simple as that.
I do like what they're trying to do, I must admit. So, yeah, I'm all for what they do.
So I think I voted for Jeremy Corbyn, for Labour, but yeah, I'd vote for Green Party.
The party says it's realistic about its prospects. There won't be many seats. But the Green wave is sweeping up disaffected voters from both the left and the right. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News, Brighton.
Well, let's just take you through a list now of all the candidates standing in the Brighton Pavilion seat. In other news, the United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has said that some of Hamas's demands to change the ceasefire deal are unworkable. That's after Hamas said it wants written guarantees from the US. The UN voted in favour of the framework devised by President Biden this week, just days after 4 hostages were rescued from Gaza. Sky News has been speaking to the parents of one of the freed hostages. His rescue was filmed in dramatic footage released by Israeli forces. Sky's Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports.
After 8 months of hoping that he was still alive, but hearing nothing about his condition or whereabouts, Andrei Kozlov's parents simply couldn't believe it when they got the call to say he'd been rescued and was on a helicopter out of Gaza.
When I heard, "Are you sitting down?" I thought it was bad news. I dropped the phone to one side. It fell under the table, and suddenly I heard from under the table, "It's good news, it's good news." And I crawled under the table. "Did you say good news?" "Yes, they're bringing Andrei over by helicopter. He's almost in Israel."
It was very emotional. It's difficult to describe.
Evgenia and Mikhail flew straight from St. Petersburg in Russia for an emotional reunion with Andrei at a hospital in Israel. It appeared to be the moment his ordeal finally caught up with him.
During the 8 months we've been waiting for him, we feared he would be changed a lot, that he would be a different man. And suddenly, there was this emotional shock. "Mama, Mama, I knew I'd return. Mama, I knew on October 7th that I would go home." When he calmed down and was able to speak calmly, I knew he was the same man.
Andrei was rescued with 2 Israeli men, Almog Jan and Shlomi Ziv, in an Israeli military operation in central Gaza on Saturday morning.
What has he told you about the last 8 months?
One of the phrases that really scared or hurt us was when he said, "There are some things I will never tell you about." As for everything else, yes, he tells us, but it's as if he's playing storyteller, as if to entertain us. Even the fact that his hands and feet were tied for 2 months, he tells it as if it were a joke.
Hamas claims that at least 270 Gazans were killed and hundreds wounded in the rescue operation. Video from the scene shows many dead in the densely populated Nuzorat market. Hamas now says it wants written guarantees from the US before agreeing a ceasefire deal. But the US Secretary of State in Qatar today said some of Hamas's demands aren't possible.
Hamas has proposed numerous changes to the proposal that was on the table. Some of the changes are workable, some are not. Here, in a nutshell, is where we stand.
For all the hostages who have returned home, like Andrei, 120 still remain in Gaza, many of them dead. Negotiations for their release continue, but hopes for a ceasefire are, again, fading. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Tel Aviv.
Jurors in the retrial of Lucy Letby have been told her previous conviction should be taken into account as an important piece of evidence. The former nurse is accused of the attempted murder of a baby girl known as Child K. She's already serving a whole life sentence for the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6 others. Sky's chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam reports.
It is Lucy Letby's status as a multiple murderer and attempted murderer of 13 babies that prosecutors say is an important piece of evidence for the jury in deciding whether she tried to kill a 14th. Born extremely prematurely, the baby identified as Child K had been stable in the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital when her condition suddenly worsened. Consultant Dr. Ravi Jayaram walked into the room and found Lucy Letby standing over the baby. Alarms which should have been going off were not. Lucy Letby was doing nothing. The prosecution say The baby's breathing tube had been displaced. Nick Johnson, KC, said the fact Lucy Letby was doing nothing and that the alarm was not sounding is evidence that Lucy Letby, the convicted murderer, had displaced the tube. Mr. Johnson told the jury that the baby suffered 2 further collapses that night. Attempts, he said, by Lucy Letby to create the impression, having been caught almost red-handed, that the baby habitually displaced its own breathing tube. Baby Kay died 3 days later. The prosecution say they're not suggesting Lucy Letby's actions caused that death, but they are suggesting that she did try to kill her. It happened after she'd already murdered 5 babies and before she murdered 2 more. Significant evidence, the prosecution say, of her intention. Ben Myers, KC, defending Lucy Letby, said she was being blamed wrongly for the death of a baby who was clinically fragile. A jury was unable to reach a verdict on this allegation at Lucy Letby's previous trial. She denies attempted murder. Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester Crown Court.
Coming up shortly, we'll have the press preview, where I'll be joined by our guest, The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and Sky's election commentator, Adam Bolton. But let's quickly get their first impressions of tonight's event. To you, first of all, Jack, what did you think about the performance of both men, about how they were received by the audience?
Well, I think it was just that. I think that the audience's reaction had the standout moments of the night. It was probably the rawest reflection of the mood in the country we've seen so far throughout the campaign here in Grimsby. Huge frustration at the Conservative Party after 14 years of government. Not a massive appetite for Keir Starmer and his vision. Both of them had their bruises punched. Sunak on the NHS, migration, Starmer on possible tax rises and his association with Jeremy Corbyn. The question is whether or not it shifted the dial at all at the moment.
Adam, who do you think came out on top?
Well, I think on balance, the Snap poll, which suggests about 2/3 gave it to Keir Starmer, is probably a fair reflection, not least because of where public opinion was beforehand, which was probably reinforced because we had a lot of the Prime Minister just having to defend the record of the last 14 years and actually making some concessions he hadn't made before about NHS waiting lists and about the boats in particular. But, what was really interesting were the moments where the audience really stumped them both. A lot of people remember for a long time Keir Starmer being accused of being a bit of a political robot and giving a very robotic reply.
Do you think that we learnt anything new, Jack?
Not really, I don't think. Both of them at the moment have got their messages. I thought it was interesting how Rishi Sunak didn't deploy his £2,000 attack on Labour, which he was very keen to do last week. Keir Starmer obviously playing a huge safety-first strategy at the moment. He does not want any chinks in his armour for the Tories to go after. So for him, it was rinse and repeat, more of the same.
Rinse and repeat. Thank you both for the moment. We're going to hear much more from you later on. Adam and Jack will be staying with us right the way through to midnight for our press preview and news review. That's it for Sky News at 10, live from Grimsby.
The stage is set for the battle for number 10.
We're joined tonight by the 2 men vying for the keys to Downing Street, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. You were looking at wealth taxes. You are looking at wealth taxes. It's OK to say it.
We're not looking at wealth taxes.
Promise number 3, reducing national debt. It's gone up since you made the pledge, hasn't it? It has.
Yes, but it was always meant to come down over time. The Tories are in no position to lecture anyone about tax rises.
I can appreciate people's frustrations. Of course, we haven't got everything right.
When I grew up, my dad was a toolmaker. He worked in a factory. It's true.
I've got a plan about what I want to do.
And I'm going to come on to that.
Keir Starmer doesn't agree with that plan.
Okay.
We're in the spin room. You can see the spin happening as we speak.
We have got Treasury officials to
crunch. Not this again.
I didn't interrupt you, Wes.
We really hope our programme this evening has helped you make up your mind.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak have been trying to convince voters that they should get their vote in the upcoming general election at a special Sky News event. The audience in the key target town of Grimsby challenged both men on their main concerns. A snap poll by YouGov suggests nearly two-thirds of those asked believe the Labour leader performed best. Hello there, you are watching the press preview live from Grimsby. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Well, it's time to see what's making the headlines with The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elson, and Sky's election commentator, Adam Bolton. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Daily Telegraph is reporting that Labour's manifesto will not rule out increasing taxes. The Times front page focuses on the Labour leader's pledge to make growth and prosperity a priority. The Mail describes Sir Keir Starmer as squirming during our programme and carries Conservative warnings about a Labour supermajority. And unsurprisingly, the Grimsby Telegraph splashes with tonight's event, picturing both leaders campaigning in the local area. Turning to tomorrow's Labour manifesto launch, The Eye says the party is planning a series of spending cuts across government departments and won't be making any new spending commitments across the public sector. The Guardian reports that Rishi Sunak's chief parliamentary aide, Craig Williams, placed a bet on a July election 3 weeks before the Prime Minister called it. He doesn't deny that he did it, but says he understands how it looks and will cooperate with any investigation. In other news, the Metro speaks to a man who was injured and whose partner and children died when his e-bike battery exploded, causing a fire. According to the Financial Times, the International Energy Agency believes the world's supply of oil will outstrip demand by the end of the decade, causing prices to drop substantially. In the Mirror, the mum of Nottingham stabbing victim Barnaby Webber has opened up about the family's hell since his death a year ago today. The Sun reports that England footballer Phil Foden and his partner have consulted a psychic ahead of the Euros. And the Star tells us that the England team will be given special dispensation to cover up at their German hotel's nude spa. Thank goodness for that. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined again tonight by Jack Elson and Adam Bolton here in Grimsby tonight. They've been here for our leaders event, the Battle for Number 10. Now going to take us through the papers, and we're going to start with, as we should be starting with, the Grimsby Telegraph. Adam, take us into their front page.
Well, their front page shows the two leaders arriving here in Grimsby, just behind us, in fact. And what's interesting, really, about it is that this was about two men, Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, but as far as we know, they never actually met. They came in separately, they did their sessions before the audience separately. There may have been something behind the scenes, but they were very particular that they didn't want to meet. And so, really, that meant that people got to focus on them each individually rather than, if you like, the argy-bargy in a debate. And perhaps it ended up that they were both, you know, a little bit more exposed than they have been in other encounters or at question time, for example.
And Jack, what did you think about that? That it was sort of, I suppose, less combative because they insisted on not meeting each other?
Yeah, completely. Obviously, different formats have different merits. One of the good things about this one for voters is that they couldn't pivot into an attack on the other. They couldn't take some flack and then sort of throw that back at the other person. Well, you know, you say I'm doing this, but the other person would do it twice as worse. And so they were exposed with this. Obviously, the Grimsby audience tonight didn't disappoint. These are the exact type of voters that they are going to have to win over if they're going to be wanting to become the next Prime Minister. Obviously, went Tory in 2019 with Boris Johnson's massive landslide, was Labour for a long time before that, big Brexit voting area, fishing town. It's all the sort of things that Keir Starmer is desperate to claw back, and at the moment, it looks like he's probably going to do that.
And I've got to say, Grimsby gave it a really warm welcome, as we can see, cordoning off the area that was needed for this massive outside broadcast. A lot of people turning up outside earlier on when the leaders were arriving, demonstrations. So I think that, you know, one should take one's hat off to Grimsby as well. And again, that's something different from all the other election events we're seeing. This really gave you a flavour of real people and the politicians.
They didn't go head-to-head, but Rishi Sunak, from my memory, did refer to Sir Keir Starmer. He hasn't got a plan for immigration. He's not saying what he wants to do. So he did try to make it combative, even though he wasn't in the same room with him at the same time.
Oh, yeah, he pulled no punches, you know. He was often attacked on, you know, taxes, migration, NHS. He is saying that Keir Starmer's got no plan to do it, playing into that sort of Tory playbook that Keir Starmer is playing it very, very safe. He's not prepared to really put his head over the parapet and say big, bold things that he would do differently. He doesn't want to rock the boat. On the contrast, Sunak, for the past few weeks, it's been a complete policy blitz. You've seen, you know, national service, you've seen tax cuts left, right and centre, stamp duty cuts. The manifesto was a, you know, festival of goodies and giveaways. Starmer, on the other hand, playing it much more safe. He doesn't want to rock the boat.
But it was interesting that it actually took a long time for the Prime Minister to get onto that attack. It was almost as if he sort of woke up for, oh, I've only got 5 minutes to go, I better get the attack lines in. And even then, as Jack said, he didn't try and repeat this rather controversial £2,000 tax claim. He just said, generally, Labour will put your taxes up, I'm cutting them. And I think one of the most telling moments in his time was when Beth Rigby raised what Ed Conway had done, actually analysing the spending plans, showing that they're going up. And he basically pleaded the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah.
You know,
Said he hadn't seen.
I don't know anything about that.
He hadn't seen the projections. Do you think he was a little bit... I mean, we'll have a look at the Sun front page. Grim evening, I think, their headline. Do you think the Prime Minister was a little bit subdued at the start of the debate, because the D-Day commemorations, that was mentioned fairly early on?
Yeah, and the polls show that this massive D-Day blunder, which he's rightly apologised for, has actually cut through with voters. And a lot of the time in Westminster, we can think that a row is dominating the country, whereas actually it's just pretty much contained within London. I think this was one of those moments where actually, wherever you are in the country, it really did cut through. It hurt, and I think Sunak has recognised that, and you know, it was brought up today, I think twice, once by Beth Rigby and then once by a member of the audience, unprompted. It's clearly, it's clearly got him, you know, very struggling at the moment, and I think that, you know, he's tried to neutralise that and put the row behind him, but it's just going to stay in people's minds. You know, as much as you try to almost rip the plaster off early with that apology, it does something, you know, it is something that's got to him, I think.
I think the worst moment for him was that lady, quite late on, who just said, look, I'm a Conservative voter, lifelong Conservative voter, but she actually brought up the parties as well under Boris Johnson. Then she mentioned D-Day, and she just said, look, I can't support the Conservatives right now. And I think, you know, according to the opinion polls, she's speaking for quite a lot of people in this country at the moment. And, you know, Sunak can only raise his hand. And, you know, she even made the point that Rishi Sunak had actually got a fixed penalty notice for the parties, so she wasn't even letting him off the hook.
Do you think, Jack, that he simply can't get away from this now, and that really has been the turning point in the election campaign, that he can't claw back from that?
It's so difficult. If you look at the polls, they really haven't shifted since 2023, when he first became Prime Minister, or near enough anyway, you know. And as Lyndon Crosby, the great Tory strategist, used to say, you know, you can't fatten a pig on market day. He's been trying beyond hope to put radical policies in the minds of voters that he hopes will make them sit up and consider voting for him. The problem is that for so many of them now, they are just putting their fingers in their ears and they're not willing to listen. We've got 3 weeks to go until the election. Now, potentially, you might have some huge moment of significance that does something to shift the needle, but it's going to have to be bloody well big, because at the moment, they're not shifting at all.
And the most significant thing, as you say, Gillian, has been the D-Day business. You know, to which he hasn't really got an answer. He just has to say, you know, I apologise, I hope you've got in your heart to forgive me, which is, you know, it's not a great way to be going into an election.
Yes, and with the D-Day commemorations, it wasn't a gaffe, it was a deliberate decision. I think that's what makes it very difficult for people to understand, and especially when he wasn't rushing back to do a live interview. It was a pre-recorded interview, played out tonight, incidentally. There didn't seem to be a real reason.
Well, actually complains in that interview that things overran.
Yes. Compounding.
You could make the argument he was trying to be just polite, though, to his interview.
Well, he was being polite, but it's sort of revealing of his attitude, I think, to the whole
It's
thing.
uncomfortable in the context of what happened, definitely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, and the fact we're still talking about it obviously just goes to show how damaging it is to him. But I think that most people, when they saw the pictures on that beach, probably just thought that they just want to be there for that moment, you know, 80th anniversary. For many of those veterans that stormed those beaches, it'll be the last time. And no matter what schedule you've got, you probably just feel like, no, actually, I have to be there rather than anywhere else, and that's why it's so bruising for him.
Just lastly on that, Adam, do you think we know the full story? Do you think that there might have been another reason that he had to rush back?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we know that this was discussed in advance, on the day, and afterwards. And on all occasions, he just simply felt he didn't need to be at that final international commemoration with the two presidents and the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of Germany, you know, and it's just a misjudgment.
Let's take a look at the Times, page 6 and 7, the headline there from Sunak, I'm doing my best. Jack, do you believe that the audience tonight thought that the Prime Minister was doing his very best?
Well, I think they gave him a fair hearing. Obviously, it's incredibly tough for him because he made lots of pledges when he first became Prime Minister. I think it was January 23. He made 5 pledges, and Beth Rigby, quite rightly, took him through all of them. Now, you can say that you've cut inflation. You can, you know, how much credit you can take for that. Obviously, people will lay it at the door of the Bank of England a lot of the time. I think that's reasonable. But he's ticked that one. Growth. You know, at the moment, obviously, you got a sort of a smidgen of growth last month, but actually, you know, throughout his tenure, it has been pretty sluggish. And then you look at NHS waiting lists, hasn't made progress. Small boats, well, they're currently higher than they were last year, tracking higher, coming across the channel. And so it's very difficult for him now to come out and say, my record has been a stonking success, because as Beth put it to him, the numbers don't lie.
But I mean, he did sort of make the admission that he knows it's been tough for people. He can understand their frustration and their anger, but things are improving.
Yeah, but the problem is, when you say, I've done my best, the voters are at liberty to say, well, yeah, but it's not good enough. You know, and that, in a sense, was the position which he was in, having to make the best of a grim situation, which it was quite clear, you know, he wasn't the only one who had contributed to that. Although people did seem in the audience quite willing to personalise it, you know, again, picked up on his support for Brexit and the consequences of it, which obviously in this area, which was heavily Brexit, blamed the European Union in part for the destruction, or in large part, of the fishing industry. But, you know, when it came up, that question from Beth Rigby linking immigration and the increase in immigration to what was promised at the time of Brexit, you know, the audience went silent.
There were gasps at some point.
They were persuaded.
There was a point there where Beth Rigby read out the numbers for the 3 years after Brexit. Net migration was about 1.9 million, a figure the PM didn't seem to know. And then the 3 years before Brexit, it was about 800,000. Now, many people in this area would have voted for Brexit for one of the key pillars of it, which was to control migration and to control the numbers coming in here, using freedoms which leaving the EU afforded us. And the fact that the Tories, for 14 years, David Cameron, the tens of thousands, after that, Boris Johnson pledged to get it down, Rishi Sunak's now pledging to get it down again, people just don't believe them anymore on that. And they've pledged some big radical policy about a net migration annual cap. Problem is, for a lot of people, they just think it's too little too late.
Yeah, he did actually go a bit further, the furthest we've heard him so far, and gave a date for the first flight to Rwanda, didn't he?
Well, he's always been saying that it's going to happen and take place in July, but then, you know, the question came back to him, well, in that case, why didn't you wait for it to prove that this policy is working? I think, you know, we've seen another survey today showing that there's a great deal of scepticism about politics and trust, and, you know, you can say it now, but if you're saying it before it happens, people just don't seem to be prepared to take it on trust.
But he did, I think it was the 24th.
24th of July, yeah.
Is that the first time we've heard
It came out in High Court documents last week, but it's the first time I think he has openly admitted that that is exactly when he wants to send flights to Rwanda. Obviously challenged as well about the timing of the election and the timing of Rwanda flights, because the smart money in Westminster for a long time is that he would call an election in the autumn to allow time for Rwanda flights to get off the ground. He could then point to maybe some dip in numbers coming across the channel and could say to Keir Starmer, look, I have a plan to stop small boats. What are you going to do? Because you said you'd axe this on day one. The fact he doesn't, so the fact he didn't do that is seen by a lot of people as a tacit admission that potentially actually he doesn't think it would lead to a dip in the numbers, and then actually he would have egg on his face if that happened. Now, he's obviously committing to that doggedly, and he's still going into it, the election, with that Rwanda pledge. The problem is now is that it might never happen.
Adam, take us to the Mail. Keir Starmer, prospect of a super majority.
Now, this is actually very interesting because this comes out of an interview on the radio, I think it was on Times Radio, that the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, did this morning in advance of today's event. And he was saying, don't allow Labour a massive majority because it would be very bad for democracy. It's always bad when a party has a big majority. And that was taken by many people as being really a tacit admission that even someone as senior in the Conservative Party as Grant Shapps doesn't think they're going to win, and he's now in the business of trying to talk down the size of the defeat of the Conservatives. And certainly a lot of the focus of Conservative policies have seemed to be aiming at that. Now, the message coming out of Conservative headquarters was, you know, Grant Shapps, you know, shouldn't have said this, overspoke a bit, even although they've been sending out advertisements putting out the same message. But now you're seeing the Daily Mail absolutely go for it and simply repeat what he said, that, you know, you don't want to create what they're calling a one-party socialist state. So we're seeing a real effort by the Tory supporting press, or the right-wing press, to frighten people, if you like, into not voting for Labour, which is different from voting for the Conservatives.
Yeah, he seemed to say the quiet bit out loud, Grant Shapps, and a lot of people in the party are thinking this is now an exercise in damage limitation, not something, as Adam said, that Tory figures out tonight in the spin room were keen to repeat. James Cleverly, Mark Spencer say, oh no, we still think we can win this. And I think that, I don't know about you, but I think that you have to carry on as if you can win it. You have to go out with a Richter's grin and kiss babies' foreheads and say, I can still be Prime Minister on July the 5th. Otherwise, everyone might as well just give up.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's not true. You know, they haven't won until they've won. And, you know, anything could happen in the next 21 days. So I don't think this is helpful, frankly, to put it out there. Although I have to say...
Adam and Jack, you can talk much more at the top of the hour. Thank you very much. Coming up next, Sky News at 11.